Deep in the fog-shrouded Ravenwood Manor, a genius killer stalks, leaving taunting notes and cryptic clues marked with a snake and dagger symbol. When a maid is found dead in a locked room, Hercule Poirot steps into a deadly game of wits. As secrets from a 1979 betrayal unravel, tied to a mysterious star society, Poirot sets cunning traps to unmask Shadow, a vengeful mastermind among the guests. With time running out, can Poirot's brilliant mind outsmart a killer who's always one step ahead? Chapter 1. The Shadowy Invitation. The rain fell in heavy sheets over London, turning the cobblestone streets into slick, shiny paths that reflected the dim glow of gas lamps. It was a cold, gray evening in late autumn, the kind that made people hurry home to warm fires and strong tea. But Hercule Poirot, the famous detective with his neat mustache and sharp eyes, was not one to rush. He sat in his cozy apartment at Whitehaven Mansions, sipping a cup of hot chocolate, his favorite drink. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm light over the polished furniture and the small, orderly desk where Poirot kept his papers. Poirot was a man who loved order. Everything in his life had a place. His shoes lined up perfectly, his books arranged by size, his thoughts clear and precise. He believed the world made sense if you used your little gray cells, as he called his brain. Tonight, though, his calm routine was about to change. A sharp knock at the door broke the quiet. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Visitors at this hour were rare. He set down his cup, adjusted his tie, and called out, "Enter, if you please." The door opened, and in stepped his old friend, Captain Arthur Hastings. Hastings was a tall, lanky man, with a kind face and a habit of getting excited too quickly. His coat was soaked, and his hat dripped water onto the rug. "Poirot, old chap," he said, shaking off the rain. "Sorry to barge in like this, but I've got something urgent." Poirot frowned at the wet spots on his rug, but waved Hastings to a chair. "Mon ami, you are always welcome, but perhaps next time an umbrella?" He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "What is this urgent matter?" Hastings pulled a damp envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Poirot. "This came for you at my club. A messenger dropped it off, but he vanished before I could ask questions. It's addressed to you, and it looks important." Poirot took the envelope, his fingers brushing over the thick, creamy paper. It was sealed with red wax, stamped with a strange symbol, a coiled snake around a dagger. The handwriting was elegant, but unfamiliar, with sharp, slanting letters. He opened it carefully, pulling out a single sheet of paper. The message was short, but its words sent a chill through him. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as a detective is unmatched. I invite you to Ravenwood Manor near the village of Blackthorn for a challenge worthy of your mind. A game of wits awaits. Come alone, save for one companion by tomorrow's dusk. Lives depend on it. Yours." A friend Poirot read the note twice. His lips pursed. "A game of wits, you say?" he murmured. "This is no ordinary invitation, Hastings. It is a dare." Hastings leaned forward, his eyes wide. "A dare? From who? And what's this about lives depending on it? Sounds dangerous, Poirot." "Dangerous, perhaps," Poirot said, tapping the paper. "But also intriguing. This friend knows how to pique the curiosity of Hercule Poirot. The snake and dagger symbol, the vague threat, it is all designed to draw me in." "Are you going?" Hastings asked, his voice a mix of worry and excitement. Poirot smiled thinly. "Of course, mon ami. A mind like mine does not refuse a puzzle. But we must be cautious. This friend may not be friendly at all." The next morning, Poirot and Hastings boarded a train to Blackthorn, a small village nestled in the misty hills of the countryside. The train chugged through green fields and dark forests, the wheels clattering on the tracks. Poirot sat by the window, his hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes scanning the passing scenery. Hastings, meanwhile, fidgeted with his hat, unable to sit still. "What do you think we'll find at Ravenwood Manor?" Hastings asked, breaking the silence. Poirot tilted his head. "A mystery, Hastings. Perhaps a crime." The note speaks of lives in danger, so we must expect trouble. But we will use our eyes and ears and my little gray cells to uncover the truth. The train pulled into Blackthorn Station by late afternoon. The village was quiet with stone cottages and a small church huddled under a gray sky. A horse-drawn carriage waited for them, driven by a silent man with a weathered face. He tipped his hat but said nothing as they climbed in. The carriage rattled along a winding road, climbing toward a dark, sprawling shape on the hill, Ravenwood Manor. The Eiger Manor was old, its stone walls covered in ivy, its tall windows like dark eyes watching their approach. Towers rose at each end, their spires lost in the mist. As the carriage stopped, the front door creaked open, and a butler appeared. He was thin, with a pale face and eyes that seemed to see too much. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," the butler said in a low voice. "And Mr. Hastings, the master awaits you inside." Poirot stepped down, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel. "The master, you say? And who might he be?" The butler's lips twitched, almost a smile. "All will be revealed, sir. Please follow me." Inside, the manor was grand but gloomy. The entrance hall had a high ceiling with wooden beams and a massive chandelier hung above, its candles unlit. Portraits lined the walls, their painted faces stern and watchful. The air smelled of old wood and wax. The butler led them to a large drawing room, where a fire roared in a stone fireplace casting flickering shadows. A man stood by the fire, his back to them. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair streaked with silver. When he turned, his face was striking. Sharp cheekbones, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth. "I am Victor Langdon, owner of Ravenwood Manor. Thank you for accepting my invitation." Poirot bowed slightly. "Monsieur Langdon, your note was most persuasive. But I am curious. Why summon a detective to your home?" Langdon's smile widened, but it held no warmth. "Because, Monsieur Poirot, I have a problem only you can solve. A game, if you will. But first, meet my guests." He gestured to the room where several people sat or stood, all watching Poirot and Hastings with interest. Langdon introduced them one by one. Lady Eleanor Gray, a beautiful woman in her 30s with dark hair and sad eyes. She wore a green dress that shimmered in the firelight, but her hands twisted nervously in her lap. Dr. Simon Caldwell, a middle-aged man with glasses and a neat beard, who nodded politely but seemed distracted, his fingers tapping on a book. Miss Clara Vance, a young woman with bright red hair and a sharp tongue, who smirked at Hastings as if she found him amusing. Mr. Reginald Holt, an older man with a gruff voice and a military bearing, who stood stiffly by the window, his eyes scanning the room. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon, Victor's wife, a quiet woman with pale skin and a habit of looking down when spoken to. "These are my guests for the weekend," Langdon said. "And you, Monsieur Poirot, are here to solve a puzzle. One of us is not what they seem." Hastings frowned. "What do you mean, not what they seem?" Langdon's eyes gleamed. "A killer, Mr. Hastings. A very clever killer. I have reason to believe one of my guests plans to strike this weekend. Your task, Monsieur Poirot, is to unmask them before it's too late." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A bold claim, Monsieur Langdon. What proof do you have of this killer?" Langdon reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This," he said, handing it to Poirot. It was a note, written in the same sharp handwriting as the invitation. It read, "One will die before the weekend ends. Find the killer, or more will follow." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This is a serious matter. Why not call the police?" Langdon laughed, a cold sound. "The police? They stumble and bumble. You, Monsieur Poirot, are the only one with a mind sharp enough to match this killer. Besides, I want this handled quietly. No scandal." Hastings shifted uncomfortably. "This feels like a trap, Poirot. Why invite a killer to your home?" "An excellent question, mon ami," Poirot said softly. "Monsieur Langdon, what do you gain from this game?" Langdon's smile faded. "Peace of mind, perhaps, or justice." You'll understand soon enough." Before Poirot could press further, a scream pierced the air. It came from upstairs, sharp and terrified. The guests froze, their faces pale. The butler appeared at the door, his expression grim. "It's Miss Vance's maid, sir. She's dead." Poirot's eyes snapped to Langdon. "It seems your game has begun, monsieur. Lead the way." The group hurried upstairs, their footsteps echoing in the silent manner. The maid's body lay in a small room off the main hall, her eyes wide with fear, a thin red line across her throat. A single candle burned on the table beside her, its flame steady despite the draft. On the floor, scrawled in chalk, was the same snake and dagger symbol from the invitation. Poirot knelt beside the body, his face calm, but his mind racing. "No, blood on the floor," he murmured. "The wound is precise. This was no accident." Hastings swallowed hard. "Who could do this, and why?" Poirot stood, his eyes sweeping the room. "That, mon ami, is what we must discover. The killer has thrown down the gauntlet. Hercule Poirot accepts the challenge." The guests whispered, among themselves, their voices tense. Lady Eleanor clutched a handkerchief, her face pale. Dr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses, muttering about shock. Miss Vance stared at the body, her smirk gone. Mr. Holt clenched his fists, his jaw tight. Mrs. Langdon stood apart, her eyes fixed on her husband. Victor Langdon watched them all, his expression unreadable. "Well, Monsieur Poirot? What now?" Poirot turned to him, his voice steady. "Now, monsieur, we investigate. Every word, every glance, every secret in this house will be uncovered. The killer may be clever, but Hercule Poirot is cleverer still." As the rain pounded against the windows, Poirot began his work, his little gray cells already piecing together the puzzle. The shadowy invitation had brought him here, and now, with a murder fresh in the air, the game was truly afoot. Chapter 2. A murder. Most ingenious, the air in Ravenwood Manor was thick with unease as the clock struck midnight. The rain had not stopped, hammering the tall windows like an angry fist. Hercule Poirot stood in the dimly lit hallway outside the maid's room where her body still lay, untouched until he could examine every detail. The other guests had been sent to their rooms, their faces pale and their whispers sharp with fear. Captain Hastings stood beside Poirot, shifting from foot to foot, his eyes darting to the shadows. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "this place gives me the creeps. That poor girl, killed like that, and with that strange symbol on the floor. What does it mean?" Poirot's mustache twitched as he adjusted his coat. "Patience, mon ami. The symbol, the murder, the note, they are pieces of a puzzle, a clever puzzle, designed by a mind that enjoys the game. We must not rush. We observe. We think we understand." Hastings frowned. "But the killer's here, Poirot. One of those people we met tonight. How can you be so calm?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "Calm, Hastings? No, I am alert. My little gray cells, they are working. The killer wants us to panic, to make mistakes. But Hercule Poirot does not play into their hands." He turned back to the room, stepping carefully around the chalk-drawn snake and dagger on the floor. The maid, a young woman named Lily, lay still, her face frozen in a look of surprise. The thin red line across her throat was clean, precise, like the work of a surgeon. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands hovering over the body. He noticed the hairpin he'd seen earlier, half hidden under a chair, its silver tip bent. He picked it up with a handkerchief and tucked it into his pocket. "Curious," he murmured. "A hairpin out of place, and this smell." He leaned closer, sniffing the air. A faint trace of perfume lingered, sweet and floral, but not from the maid. Her clothes smelled of soap and starch. Hastings watched, his brow furrowed. "What's curious about a hairpin? Maids wear them, don't they?" Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps, mon ami, but this one is not ordinary. It is bent, as if used for something else. A lock, perhaps, or a weapon. We shall see." The butler, Mr. Grayson, appeared at the door, his pale face like a mask. Monsieur Poirot, the master asks that you join him in the study. He wishes to speak privately. Poirot nodded. Very well. Hastings, stay here. Guard the room. Let no one enter. Hastings puffed out his chest, trying to look brave. Right, Poirot. I'll keep watch. The study was on the ground floor, a large room with heavy curtains and shelves packed with books. A fire burned low, casting long shadows across the rug. Victor Langdon sat behind a desk, his fingers steepled, his blue eyes sharp. Monsieur Poirot, he said, you've seen the body. What do you make of it? Poirot sat across from him, his posture perfect. A murder, Monsieur Langdon. Clever, precise, and bold. The killer left a symbol to taunt us. The snake and dagger, it means something. Tell me, what do you know of it? Langdon's smile was tight. An old family crest, perhaps. My ancestors were complicated people, but I suspect it's the killer's way of playing with us. They want to be noticed. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And why invite me here? You knew of a killer, yet you gathered these guests. Why? Langdon leaned back, his voice low. I received threats, Monsieur Poirot. Letters like the one I showed you. They promised death but never said who or when. I thought, if I brought you here, you could stop it before it happened. I was wrong. Wrong? Poirot tilted his head. Or did you hope for this? A murder to test me? You play a dangerous game, monsieur. Langdon's face darkened. I'm no fool, Poirot. I want this killer caught. My guests, my friends, are in danger. You must act quickly. Poirot stood, smoothing his coat. I will act, monsieur, but I act with method. Tell me about your guests, their secrets, their grudges, the truth, if you please. Langdon hesitated, then spoke. Lady Eleanor Gray was a widow, her husband dead under mysterious circumstances. Dr. Simon Caldwell was a brilliant chemist rumored to have debts. Miss Clara Vance was a writer, sharp-witted and ambitious with a knack for digging up secrets. Mr. Reginald Holt, a retired soldier, had a temper and a past tied to Langdon's family. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon, Victor's wife, was quiet, but her eyes held pain. Langdon claimed he trusted them all, yet his voice wavered. Poirot listened, his mind cataloging every word. Thank you, monsieur. Now I must speak to the others. The truth lies in their stories. Back in the drawing room, the guests waited, their faces tense. Lady Eleanor sat by the fire, her handkerchief crumpled. Dr. Caldwell paced, muttering to himself. Miss Vance leaned against a wall, her eyes darting between the others. Mr. Holt stood rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. Mrs. Langdon was absent, claiming a headache. Poirot began his questions, his voice calm but firm. Lady Eleanor, you knew the maid, Lily? She nodded, her voice soft. Only a little. She was kind, quiet. I can't imagine why anyone would hurt her. Dr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses. I barely saw the girl. I was in my room, reading. When it happened, Miss Vance smirked. Convenient, doctor. Reading what? A book on poisons, maybe? Caldwell glared. Mind your tongue, Clara. I'm no killer. Mr. Holt snorted. Enough bickering. Whoever did this is laughing at us. We need action, not words. Poirot raised a hand. Action comes from understanding, Monsieur Holt. Tell me, where were you at the time of the murder? Holt's jaw tightened. In the billiard room, alone. I like my own company. Poirot's eyes flicked to each guest, noting their reactions. Fear, anger, suspicion, they all hid something. He excused himself, promising to return, and went to find Mrs. Langdon. Her room was at the end of a long hall, its door slightly ajar. Poirot knocked softly. Madame Langdon, it is Hercule Poirot. May I speak with you? A faint voice answered, Come in. Mrs. Langdon sat by a window, her face pale, her hands trembling. I'm sorry, Monsieur Poirot. This horror has shaken me. Poirot sat across from her, his tone gentle. I understand, madame, but I must ask, did you see or hear anything unusual tonight? She shook her head, but her eyes flickered. Nothing. I was in my room. I heard the scream, but I stayed here. Poirot leaned forward. Madam, the truth is a light in the dark. If you know something, tell me. Her lips parted, then closed. I can't. Not yet. Before Poirot could press further, a loud crash echoed from downstairs. He hurried out, Mrs. Langdon following. In the entrance hall, a large vase lay shattered on the floor. Hastings stood nearby, red-faced. Poirot, I heard a noise and came running. Someone was here. Poirot scanned the hall. A side door stood open, leading to the gardens. He stepped outside, the rain cold on his face. Footprints marked the mud leading into the dark. The killer moves quickly, he said, but they leave traces. Back inside, Poirot gathered the guests again. Someone was in the hall just now. Who left this room? They all denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot held up the bent hairpin. This was found near Lily's body. Does it belong to anyone here? Silence. Then Miss Vance spoke, her voice sharp. It's not mine, but I've seen one like it. Ask Lady Eleanor. Lady Eleanor gasped. How dare you? I lost a hairpin days ago. It's not proof of anything. Poirot pocketed the hairpin. We shall see. For now, no one leaves this house. The killer is among us, and I will find them. As the night deepened, Poirot sat in his room, sketching the snake and dagger symbol in his notebook. The murder was no random act. It was a challenge, a move in a deadly game. The killer was clever, but Poirot's mind was sharper. He would unravel their secrets, one clue at a time. Chapter 3. Poirot's arrival at Ravenwood Manor. The rain-soaked road to Ravenwood Manor twisted through the misty hills, and the carriage carrying Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings rattled along under a sky heavy with clouds. The air was damp, the kind that clung to your skin and made your bones ache. Poirot sat upright, his gloved hands folded, his sharp eyes taking in every detail through the carriage window. The gnarled trees, the fleeting shadows, the distant outline of the manor, looming like a giant against the gray dusk. Hastings beside him clutched his hat, his face a mix of excitement and nerves. Poirot, Hastings said, breaking the silence. This place looks like something out of a ghost story. Do you really think we're walking into a trap? Poirot's mustache twitched. A trap, mon ami? Perhaps, but traps work both ways. The hunter may become the hunted. We shall see who is cleverer. The carriage slowed as Ravenwood Manor came into full view. Its stone walls, draped in ivy, rose 3 stories high with narrow windows like slits in a fortress. 2 towers flanked the building, their pointed roofs lost in the mist. The front door, heavy oak with iron studs, creaked open as the carriage stopped, and a thin man stepped out, the butler, Mr. Grayson, his face pale and his eyes sharp. Monsieur, Poirot, Mr. Hastings, Grayson said, his voice low and smooth. Welcome to Ravenwood, the master awaits. Poirot stepped down, his polished shoes crunching on wet gravel. Merci, Monsieur Grayson. Your master, he is Victor Langdon. We? The butler nodded, his expression giving nothing away. This way, please. Inside, the manor was grand but cold. The entrance hall stretched wide, its high ceiling crossed with dark beams. A chandelier hung above, unlit, its crystals catching the faint glow of wall sconces. Portraits stared down from the walls, stern men and women with eyes that seemed to follow you. The air smelled of old wood, wax, and something sharp like metal. Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. Blasted place, he muttered. Feels like a tomb. Poirot shot him a look. Focus, Hastings. A tomb, perhaps, but one full of secrets. Observe everything. Grayson led them to a drawing room where a fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace. The room was warm but heavy, with tension. 5 people waited, their faces lit by flickering flames. Victor Langdon stood by the fire, tall and commanding, his silver-streaked hair catching the light. His blue eyes locked onto Poirot, and a smile played on his lips. Charming, but cold. Monsieur Poirot, Langdon said, stepping forward. I'm honored. Your reputation precedes you. Poirot bowed slightly. And yours, Monsieur Langdon, is a mystery. Your invitation was most intriguing. Langdon gestured to the others. My guests. Allow me to introduce them. He pointed to Lady Eleanor Gray, a woman in her 30s with dark hair and pale, sad eyes. Her green dress shimmered, but her hands twisted a handkerchief nervously. Dr. Simon Caldwell, a wiry man with glasses and a neat beard, clutched a book, his fingers tapping restlessly. Miss Clara Vance, young and sharp with red hair and a bold stare, leaned against a chair, sizing up Poirot. Mr. Reginald Holt, an older man with a soldier's stance, stood by the window, his face hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon, Victor's wife, sat quietly, her pale face half hidden by shadows, her eyes downcast. Langdon's voice dropped. You're here, Monsieur Poirot, because danger is among us. One of these guests, or perhaps another, plans to kill. I need your mind to stop. Them? Hastings blinked. Kill? Good heavens, man, why not call the police? Langdon's smile tightened. The police are clumsy. This requires finesse. Besides, I want no scandal. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You speak of a killer, yet you invite them to your home. Why? Monsieur? Langdon pulled a folded note from his pocket, its paper marked with the snake and dagger symbol. This came weeks ago. It promised death. I thought with you here we could catch them before they act. Poirot read the note. Death comes to Ravenwood. Find the killer, or all will pay. He folded it carefully. A bold challenge. But why? Me? Langdon's eyes gleamed. Because, Monsieur Poirot, only you can match a mind this clever. Before Poirot could respond, a scream tore through the manor, high and sharp from upstairs. The guests froze. Grayson appeared, his face grim. It's Lily, the maid, she's dead. Poirot's head snapped up. Show me. They hurried upstairs, the group trailing behind, their whispers loud in the silent halls. In a small room, Lily lay on the floor, her throat cut, her eyes wide with shock. A single candle burned on a table, its flame steady. On the floor, in chalk, was the snake and dagger symbol. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands hovering over the body. No struggle, he said softly. The cut is clean, this was planned. He noticed a bent hairpin under a chair and picked it up with his handkerchief. Curious, he murmured, sniffing the air. A faint perfume lingered, sweet and out of place. Hastings swallowed hard. Who could do this, Poirot? Poirot stood, his eyes scanning the room. Someone bold, Hastings. Someone who wants us to know they are here. Langdon watched from the doorway, his face unreadable. Well, Monsieur Poirot? Your thoughts? Poirot turned, his voice calm. The game has begun, Monsieur. The killer has made their move, now it is my turn. The guests shifted nervously. Lady Eleanor clutched her handkerchief. Dr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses. Miss Vance stared at the body. Mr. Holt clenched his fists, and Mrs. Langdon looked away, trembling. Poirot addressed them. No one leaves this house. I will question each of you. The truth will come out. As they dispersed, Poirot lingered, sketching the symbol in his notebook. The murder was no accident. It was a challenge, a dare to his intellect. The killer was clever, but Hercule Poirot was ready to play. Chapter 4. The Puzzle of the Locked Room. The rain battered Ravenwood Manor, its rhythm a steady drum against the windows as the night grew darker. Inside, the air was heavy with fear, the kind that makes voices hush and eyes dart. Hercule Poirot stood in the small room where Lily the maid had been found dead, her throat cut with chilling precision. The chalk-drawn snake and dagger symbol on the floor seemed to mock him, its lines sharp in the flickering candlelight. Captain Hastings hovered near the door, his face pale, his hands fidgeting with his coat buttons. Poirot, Hastings whispered. This room. It's locked tight. Windows bolted, door secured. How did the killer get in and out? Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the room. A fine question, mon ami. A locked room is a puzzle, and Hercule Poirot loves a puzzle. The answer lies in what we see, and what we do not. The room was small, barely more than a closet, used for storing linens and cleaning supplies. Shelves lined one wall, stacked with folded sheets and towels. A single chair sat in the corner, where Poirot had found the bent hairpin. The candle on the table still burned, its wax pooling slowly. The door, heavy oak with a sturdy lock, showed no signs of tampering. The windows, high and narrow, were bolted shut, their latches rusted from disuse. Yet Lily lay dead, her blood barely staining the floor. Poirot knelt again, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the body. "The wound," he said softly, "is clean. No struggle, no mess. The killer was swift, confident, but how did they enter?" Hastings scratched his head. "Maybe they had a key. The butler, Grayson, he's got access, hasn't he?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Perhaps, Hastings, but a key is too simple for a mind this clever. No, there is something else. Something hidden." He stood and examined the walls, tapping lightly with his knuckles. The sound was solid, except near the shelves, where a faint, hollow echo answered. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He moved a stack of towels, revealing a panel that blended with the wood. He pressed it, and with a soft click it slid open, exposing a narrow passage. Dust swirled in the candlelight, and a cold draft carried the scent of damp stone. "A secret passage," Hastings exclaimed, stepping forward. "That's how they did it." Poirot held up a hand. "Not so fast, mon ami. A passage, yes, but it proves nothing yet. We must explore, but with care." The passage was cramped, its walls rough and damp. Poirot lit a second candle from the table and led the way, his small frame moving with purpose. Hastings followed, ducking to avoid cobwebs. The passage twisted, descending slightly, and ended at another panel. Poirot pushed it open, revealing the back of a bookcase in the Manor's library. They stepped out, the shelves creaking as they moved aside. The library was vast, its walls lined with books, their spines faded but gold-lettered. A large desk sat in the center, papers scattered across it. A single lamp burned, casting long shadows. Poirot's eyes darted to the papers, letters, bills, and a map of the manor, its edges worn. "Curious," Poirot said, picking up the map. "This shows the manor's layout, but no passages. Our killer knows more than the master of the house, perhaps." Hastings frowned. "Or Langdon's hiding something. He's the one who brought us here, Poirot. What if he's playing us?" Poirot's lips curved. "A possibility, Hastings. Everyone here has secrets. We must uncover them all." They returned to the drawing room where the guests waited, their faces tense. Victor Langdon stood by the fire, his blue eyes watching Poirot closely. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her eyes red. Dr. Simon Caldwell sat with his book, his fingers still tapping. Miss Clara Vance leaned forward, her red hair catching the light, her smirk faint but present. Mr. Reginald Holt paced, his boots loud on the rug. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat apart, her hands folded, her gaze distant. Poirot addressed them, his voice calm but firm. "The room where Lily was found was locked, yet the killer entered and left. A secret passage has been discovered. Does anyone know of it?" Silence. Then Miss Vance spoke, her tone sharp. "A passage? How Gothic. Maybe our host has more secrets than he lets on." She glanced at Langdon, her eyes narrowing. Langdon's jaw tightened. "I know nothing of passages, Miss Vance. This house is old, full of surprises." Lady Eleanor's voice trembled. "Who would do this? Poor Lily, she was just a maid." Dr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses. "A maid, yes, but perhaps she saw something, knew something." Holt snorted. "Or she was in the wrong place. This killer's toying with us." Poirot held up the bent hairpin. "This was found near the body. Does it belong to anyone?" Lady Eleanor gasped. "I told you I lost one like it. It's not proof." Miss Vance laughed softly. "Lost it conveniently, didn't you?" "Enough," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the tension. Accusations without evidence are useless. I will question each of you alone. The truth will emerge. He began with Langdon, in the study. The fire had died to embers, and the room felt colder. Monsieur Langdon, Poirot said, you claim ignorance of the passage, yet this is your home. Explain. Langdon leaned back, his fingers steepled. The manor's been in my family for centuries. Old houses have secrets, passages, rooms, things forgotten. I've never explored them all. And the symbol? The snake and dagger? Langdon's eyes flickered. An old crest, as I said. My ancestors were ruthless. Perhaps the killer knows our history. Poirot's gaze was steady. Or perhaps you know more than you say. Why invite these guests? Langdon smiled thinly. They're friends, colleagues. I thought a weekend together would be pleasant. I was wrong. Poirot moved on, questioning each guest. Lady Eleanor spoke of her husband's death, her voice breaking. Dr. Caldwell admitted to debts, but swore he was no killer. Miss Vance was evasive, her wit sharp, but her answers vague. Holt claimed he was in the billiard room alone, his temper flaring when pressed. Mrs. Langdon, in her room, whispered of hearing footsteps before the scream, but saw nothing. Back in the drawing room, Poirot noticed a scratch on Caldwell's hand, barely visible. How did you get this, Doctor? Caldwell blinked. A book's sharp edge, nothing more. Poirot nodded, but filed the detail away. As the night wore on, a loud thud echoed from the hall. Hastings ran to check, finding a fallen candelabra, its candles scattered. Footprints led to the garden door, faint in the rain-soaked mud. The killer moves again, Poirot said, his voice low. They are bold but careless. He gathered the guests, his eyes scanning their faces. Someone was in the hall. Who? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot held up the second note found under his door. You see, but do you understand? The game is just beginning. He read it aloud, watching their reactions, fear, anger, suspicion. The killer watches us, Poirot said. But I watch them. They will make a mistake. As the guests dispersed, Poirot returned to the locked room, sketching the passage's path in his notebook. The murder was a riddle, the passage a clue, the symbol a taunt. The killer was clever, but Poirot's mind was sharper. He would solve the puzzle no matter how deep it ran. Chapter 5. Clues in the Candlelight. The storm raged on outside Ravenwood Manor, its winds howling like a restless spirit. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, every creak of the old house making the guests jump. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, where the fire cast a warm but uneasy glow. The single candle from the murdered maid's room now sat on a table before him, its flame steady despite the draught. Its wax had dripped in a peculiar pattern, and Poirot's sharp eyes studied it closely. Captain Hastings leaned against the doorway, his face tight with worry. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. That candle, it's just a candle, isn't it? You've been staring at it for ages. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile on his lips. A candle, mon ami? No, it is a clue. Everything in this house speaks if you know how to listen. This flame, this wax, they tell a story. Hastings frowned. A story? It's a bit of wax and wick. The killer's out there, not in a candle. Poirot raised a finger. Patience, Hastings. The smallest things reveal the biggest truths. Observe the wax, its drips are uneven, as if the candle was moved. Yet it burned steadily when we found poor Lily. Why? Hastings blinked, confused. Moved? But the room was locked. Exactly, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The locked room, the secret passage, the candle's wax. These are pieces of the killer's puzzle. We must fit them together. The guests were gathered in the drawing room, their faces lit by the fire's glow. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes watching Poirot like a hawk. Lady Eleanor Gray sat with her handkerchief, her fingers trembling. Dr. Simon Caldwell clutched his book, his glasses slipping down his nose. Miss Clara Vance lounged in a chair, her red hair bright, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood stiffly, his soldier's posture unbroken, but his eyes restless. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her pale face half hidden, her hands folded tightly. Poirot held up the candle. This was found in the room where Lily died. Its wax suggests movement. Did anyone see this candle before the murder? Silence fell, heavy as the storm outside. Lady Eleanor spoke first, her voice soft. I saw Lily carrying a candle earlier. She was lighting the halls, but I didn't notice anything odd. Dr. Caldwell cleared his throat. Candles are everywhere in this old place. Hardly a clue, Monsieur Poirot. Miss Vance's eyes narrowed. Unless someone used it to sneak around. That passage you found, maybe the killer carried it. Holt snorted. Nonsense, a candle's no weapon, we're wasting time. Poirot's gaze flicked to Mrs. Langdon. Madame, you were in your room. Did you see or hear anything unusual? A light, perhaps, moving in the dark? Mrs. Langdon's eyes widened, then dropped. I heard footsteps, as I said, but no light. I was too frightened to look. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her hesitation. He turned to Langdon. Monsieur, this candle, its wax is unique. A special blend, perhaps? Not like the others in the manor. Langdon's smile was tight. My staff orders supplies. I don't bother with details like candles. Yet details, Poirot said, are everything. I will examine this further. He dismissed the guests, asking them to stay in their rooms. Alone with Hastings, Poirot inspected the candle closely. The wax had a faint scent, like the perfume he'd noticed near Lily's body, sweet, floral, out of place. He scraped a bit of wax into his handkerchief, tucking it beside the bent hairpin from the crime scene. Hastings, he said. Fetch Grayson. I must know about this candle's origin. Hastings returned with the butler, whose pale face and steady eyes gave nothing away. Monsieur Poirot, Grayson said. The candles are ordered from a local supplier. Nothing special about them. Poirot held up the candle. This one is different. Its scent, its wax, unique. Where did it come from? Grayson's lips twitched, almost a frown. I'll check the records, sir, but I assure you, it's likely just a mistake. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A mistake in a house where murder occurs? I think not. Find those records, Monsieur Grayson. As the butler left, Hastings whispered, He's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see his face? Oui, mon ami, Poirot said. Everyone hides something, but the truth cannot hide forever. Poirot decided to explore the secret passage again, this time alone. He lit a fresh candle and slipped behind the library bookcase, its panel creaking softly. The passage was cold, its walls damp, and the air carried a faint metallic tang. He moved, slowly noting scuff marks on the stone floor, fresh as if someone had passed recently. The passage branched, one path leading to the stables, another to the upper floors. Near the stable exit, he found a single drop of wax matching the candle's scent. Interesting, Poirot murmured, marking the spot in his notebook. The killer moves freely, but leaves traces. Back in the library, he examined the desk again. Among the papers was a letter, half hidden under a blotter, written in the same sharp handwriting as the killer's notes. It read, The game is set. The first move is mine. No signature, but the snake and dagger symbol was stamped at the bottom. Poirot's heart quickened. The killer is bold, he said to himself. They write, they mark, they taunt. But why? He returned to the drawing room where Hastings waited, looking anxious. Anything, Poirot? A letter, Poirot said, showing it to him. The killer plays with us, Hastings. They want me to chase them. Hastings paled. Then we're in danger. All of us. Perhaps, Poirot said. But danger sharpens the mind. We must question the guests again. He called them back one by one. Lady Eleanor admitted to walking the halls before the murder, claiming she was restless. Dr. Caldwell said he'd been reading, but his book's pages were unmarked, as if untouched. Miss Vance laughed off questions, her wit sharp but evasive. Holt grew angry, insisting he'd been alone. Mrs. Langdon whispered of hearing a door creak before the scream, but her eyes avoided Poirot's. As the interrogations ended, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. Poirot and Hastings rushed to find a tray of glasses shattered on the floor, the cook trembling. "Someone ran through here," she gasped. "I saw a shadow, then this." Poirot examined the scene. A back door stood, open, rain blowing in. Footprints, faint but fresh, led outside. He followed them to the garden where they vanished in the mud. A single petal, crushed and wet, lay nearby, roses like the perfume. "The killer moves again," Poirot said, his voice low. "They are close, watching." Back inside, he confronted the guests. Someone was in the kitchen. Who left this room? They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot held up the petal. "This was found outside. Roses like the scent in Lily's room. Who wears such perfume?" Lady Eleanor flushed. I have rose perfume, but I wasn't there." "Miss," Vance smirked. "Convenient, Eleanor. Another coincidence?" "Enough," Poirot said. "No one leaves this house. The killer is among us, and I will find them." As the night deepened, Poirot sat in his room, the candles wax and the letter before him. He sketched the snake and dagger symbol, his mind racing. The passage, the wax, the perfume, the notes, they were threads in a web, and the killer was the spider. But Hercule Poirot was no prey. He would unravel the puzzle step by step. Chapter 6. The Genius Mind of the Suspect. The storm outside Ravenwood Manor roared like an angry beast, its winds rattling the windows and casting wild shadows across the walls. Inside, the atmosphere was just as tense, the air thick with mistrust. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, the flickering light of a single lamp illuminating the shelves of dusty books and the worn map of the manor on the desk. The snake and dagger symbol sketched in his notebook seemed to pulse with meaning. Captain Hastings paced nearby, his boots scuffing the rug, his face tight with unease. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice hushed. "This killer, they're playing with us. Those notes, the symbol, the passage, it's like they're daring you to catch them. What kind of mind thinks like that?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. "A genius mind, mon ami. A mind that loves the game as much as I do. They plan, they hide, they taunt. But every move they make leaves a trace, and Hercule Poirot will find it." Hastings stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. "But who? Langdon? One of the guests? They all seem nervous, but a killer?" Poirot tapped his notebook. "The killer is clever, Hastings. They know this house, its secrets, its shadows. But they are not perfect. The candle's wax, the perfume, the bent hairpin. These are their mistakes." The library was quiet, save for the storm's howl. Poirot returned to the desk, where the letter he'd found last night lay. "The game is set. The first move is mine." The handwriting matched the killer's notes, sharp and precise, with the snake and dagger symbol stamped below. He examined it, again noting a faint smudge of ink on the corner. Blue, not black, unlike the manor's inkwells. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "This ink, it is different. A clue, perhaps." Hastings leaned over. "Ink? You think the killer wrote this here? Or brought it with them?" Poirot said. "We must learn more about our guests, their habits, their tools, their secrets." He decided to question the guests again, but first he wanted to inspect the secret passage once more. He lit a candle, ordinary, unlike the scented one from Lily's room, and slipped behind the bookcase. The passage was damp, its stone walls cold under his gloved fingers. He moved carefully, noting the scuff marks from before and a new find. A tiny scrap of paper crumpled and wedged in a crack. He unfolded it, revealing a single word in the same sharp handwriting. "Watch." Poirot's heart quickened. "The killer speaks again," he said to himself. But what do they watch? He emerged in the stables where the rain drummed on the roof. A horse snorted in its stall, and a lantern hung on a hook. its light dim. Poirot found another drop of wax near, the passage's exit matching the scented candle. He pocketed the paper scrap and returned to the library, his mind racing. Back in the drawing room, the guests were restless. Victor Langdon stood by the fire, his posture rigid, his eyes tracking Poirot. Lady Eleanor Gray sat with her crumpled handkerchief, her face pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers tapping his book. Miss Clara Vance smirked, her red hair bright in the firelight. Mr. Reginald Holt stood by the window, his fists clenched. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat quietly, her eyes flickering with fear. Poirot held up the paper scrap. This was found in the, passage. One word, watch. Does it mean anything to anyone? Silence. Then Miss Vance laughed, her voice sharp. Sounds like a warning. Someone's watching us, aren't they, Monsieur Poirot? Lady Eleanor gasped. Watching? Oh, this is too much. Dr. Caldwell frowned. A word on a scrap? It could be nothing. A servant's note. Holt's voice was gruff. Or the killer's game, they're mocking us. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langdon. Madame, you heard footsteps before the murder. Did you hear anything else? A voice, perhaps? She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. No. Just the storm. And the creak of a door. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A door? Which one? I don't know, she said, looking away. It was faint. Poirot dismissed the guests, keeping Langdon behind. Monsieur. This ink on the letter, blue, not black. Do you use such ink? Langdon's brow furrowed. No, my desk has black ink, but the guests, some write letters. Check their rooms. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. He and Hastings searched the guests' rooms with Grayson's reluctant permission. In Lady Eleanor's room, they found a bottle of rose perfume, its scent matching the crime scene. In Dr. Caldwell's room, a vial of blue ink sat on his desk, half empty. Miss Vance's room had a notebook with sharp handwriting but no incriminating notes. Holt's room was sparse, with only a military knife, clean but sharp. Mrs. Langdon's room held a locked diary, which she refused to open. Too many clues, Hastings said, frustrated. Perfume, ink, a knife, how do we know what matters? Poirot smiled. Everything matters, Hastings. The killer hides in plain sight, but their mind betrays them. As they returned to the drawing room, a loud bang echoed from the hall. They rushed to find a window shattered, glass scattered across the floor. Rain poured in, and a cold wind carried a faint scent of roses. Footprints led from the window to the garden, blurred by the storm. The killer strikes again, Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. They break the window to distract us. Hastings peered outside. But why? To escape? Or to mislead, Poirot said. He examined the glass, noting a small chip missing, as if struck by something sharp. This was deliberate. The killer wants us to chase shadows. He gathered the guests, holding up the latest note. You chase shadows, detective. The light hides. The truth. The killer speaks again, he said. Who was in the hall? They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Dr. Caldwell's sleeve, barely visible. Doctor, your sleeve, ink. Explain. Caldwell blinked, flustered. I was writing earlier, it must have smudged. Poirot nodded but said nothing. He dismissed the guests, his mind buzzing. The ink, the perfume, the passage, the notes. They were threads in a clever web. The killer was a genius, but so was Poirot. As the night deepened, he sat in his room, the candle's glow casting shadows on his notebook. He sketched the snake and dagger symbol, adding the word, watch. The killer was close, their minds sharp, but Poirot's little gray cells were sharper. He would unravel their game, one clue at a time. Chapter 7. Whispers of Motive. The storm outside Ravenwood Manor had softened to a steady drizzle, but the air inside remained heavy with dread. The old house creaked under the weight of its secrets, its dark corridors lit only by flickering candles. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, his small frame poised in a high-backed chair, his notebook open on the desk. The snake and dagger symbol stared back at him, alongside the word watch from the scrap of paper he'd found in the secret passage. The latest note, slipped under his door, lay beside it. You see the pieces, but not the picture. Time ticks on. Poirot's sharp eyes glinted in the lamplight, his mind racing. Captain Hastings stood by the window, peering into the rainy night, his face tight with worry. Poirot, Hastings said, turning. This killer's toying with us. Notes, symbols, broken windows. It's like they're laughing at us. Why? Kill the maid? What's their motive? Poirot's mustache twitched. Motive, mon ami, is the heart of the crime. The killer's mind is clever, but their reasons are human. Greed, revenge, fear. We must listen to the whispers of this house to find them. Hastings frowned. Whispers? You mean clues? The ink, the perfume, that paper scrap? Oui, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. And the people. Each guest hides something. Their words, their looks. They betray their secrets. We must dig deeper. The library was quiet, its shelves looming like silent witnesses. Poirot examined the desk again, focusing on the blue ink smudge on the killer's letter. It matched the vial in Dr. Caldwell's room, but was it too obvious? He turned to the Manor's map, tracing the secret passage's path. The alcove with the dusty mirror found last night nagged at him. Why a mirror? What did it reflect? He decided to revisit the alcove. Slipping behind the bookcase, he lit a candle and navigated the damp passage, its stone walls cold under his touch. The alcove was small, barely a nook. The mirror cracked but clean. Poirot held his candle high, watching the light bounce off the glass. A faint glint caught his eye, a tiny metal shard, wedged in the floor's crack. He pried it out with his handkerchief. A piece of a blade, sharp and thin, like a scalpel. Very curious, Poirot murmured. A blade in a hidden place. The killer's tool, perhaps? He pocketed the shard and returned to the drawing room where the guests were gathered, their faces tense in the candlelight. Victor Langdon stood by the fire, his blue eyes sharp. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her cheeks pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell sat with his book, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk faint. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes scanning the room. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the metal shard. This was found in a hidden alcove. It is part of a blade, perhaps the one that killed Lily. Does anyone recognize it? Silence. Dr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his voice tight. A scalpel? I'm a chemist, not a surgeon. I have no such tools. Miss Vance raised an eyebrow. Convenient, Doctor. Your hands are steady enough for a clean cut. Caldwell glared. Watch your accusations, Clara. Holt's voice was gruff. A blade means nothing. Anyone could have dropped it. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor. Madame, your perfume. Rose, oui? It was in Lily's room and near the passage. Explain. Her eyes widened. I told you I lost a bottle. Someone could have taken it. Mrs. Langdon spoke softly, her voice shaking. I smelled roses last night, before the scream, but I didn't see anyone. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Merci, madame. Every detail helps. He addressed Langdon. Monsieur, you claim the snake and dagger is an old family crest, yet it appears on the killer's notes. Have you received others? Langdon hesitated, then nodded. One more, weeks ago. It said blood will repay blood. I thought it a prank. Show me, Poirot said. Langdon retrieved a crumpled note from his study, its handwriting and symbol matching the others. Poirot studied it, noting another blue ink smudge. This killer has a purpose, he said. Revenge, perhaps, but for what? Hastings whispered. Revenge? Against Langdon? Or all of them? Poirot nodded. We must learn their pasts. Motive hides in history. He questioned the guests individually. Lady Eleanor spoke of her husband's death, a fall from a cliff, ruled an accident but whispered to be murder. Dr. Caldwell admitted to financial ruin, his research funded by Langdon. Miss Vance, a writer, had published scandalous stories about wealthy families, including Langdon's. Holt, a former soldier, had served with Langdon's father, their parting bitter. Mrs. Langdon hinted at family disputes, but refused to elaborate. Poirot returned to the drawing room. A sharp cry came from the kitchen. He and Hastings rushed to find the cook, pale and trembling, pointing to a knife on the counter, its blade missing a chip, matching the shard from the alcove. Someone left it here, the cook stammered. It wasn't there an hour ago. Poirot examined the knife, its handle worn but clean. The killer grows careless, he said. Or bold. He confronted the guests, holding up the knife. This blade matches the shard. Who placed it here? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint tremor in Holt's hand, a bead of sweat on Caldwell's brow. He dismissed them, his mind cataloging their reactions. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving a thick fog. Poirot and Hastings searched the garden, finding a torn glove near the shattered window, its fabric matching Holt's coat. Another clue, Poirot said, but too many point in all directions. Back in his room, Poirot found a new note under the door. You seek motives, but miss the truth. The next move is mine. The blue ink smudged again, and a faint rose scent clung to the paper. The killer is close, Poirot said, his voice low. They watch, they plan, they strike, but Hercule Poirot will be ready. Chapter 8. The alibi that wasn't. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor thickened, cloaking the old house in a ghostly veil. Inside, the tension was sharper than the storm's winds, every creak of the floorboards setting nerves on edge. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, his small frame silhouetted against the fire's glow. His notebook opened to a page filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, and the latest note. The past is the key, but the lock is mine. The blue ink smudge and faint rose scent on the note lingered in his mind. Captain Hastings sat nearby, his face pale, his fingers drumming on his knee. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. These notes, they're piling up. The killer's mocking us. And that knife in the kitchen, the glove, the perfume. It's all too much. How do we sort it out? Poirot's eyes twinkled in the candlelight. Order, mon ami. The killer scatters clues to confuse, but Hercule Poirot brings order to chaos. Their alibis, those are the key. A true alibi holds like stone. A false one crumbles like sand. Hastings frowned. Alibis? They all claim they were in their rooms or the billiard room when Lily was killed, but someone's lying. We, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. And lies are fragile. We will test them one by one. The guests were gathered, their faces tense in the flickering light. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes sharp but guarded. Lady Eleanor, Gray clutched her handkerchief, her lips trembling. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his book untouched on his lap. Miss Clara Vance leaned back, her red hair catching the fire's glow, her smirk faint but sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood stiff, his soldier's posture rigid. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her pale hands folded, her eyes avoiding the others. Poirot addressed them, his voice calm but firm. The killer moves among us, leaving notes, clues, distractions. Each of you claims an alibi for the time of Lily's murder. I will test them. Speak the truth, or it will find you. Lady Wyme. Eleanor spoke first, her voice shaky. I was in my room, reading. I heard the scream and came running. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Reading, madame? What book? She hesitated. A novel. I don't recall the title. I was nervous. Poirot nodded, noting her pause. He turned to Dr. Caldwell. And you, monsieur? You were reading as well? Caldwell nodded, his fingers tapping. In my room, yes, a chemistry journal. I lost track of time. Miss Vance laughed softly. Convenient, Doctor. Your journal must be fascinating to miss a scream. Caldwell glared. I was focused, Clara. Not everyone eavesdrops like you. Holt snorted. I was in the billiard room alone. No one to vouch for me, but that's the truth. Poirot tilted his head. Alone, Monsieur Holt? Yet a glove matching your coat was found in the garden. Explain. Holt's jaw tightened. I lost a glove days ago. Someone's setting me up, Mrs. Langdon whispered. I was in my room. I heard footsteps, then the scream. I stayed put. Langdon stepped forward. I was in my study working. The door was open. I heard nothing until the scream. Poirot's mustache twitched. Interesting. All of you alone, yet a murder occurred. Someone lies. He decided to test their alibis further. He sent Hastings to check the billiard room where Holt claimed to be. Hastings returned, shaking his head. The cues are neatly racked, Poirot. No sign anyone played recently. Holt's face reddened. I was there, I said. I didn't touch the cues. Poirot turned to Caldwell. Your journal, Doctor. May I see it? Caldwell hesitated, then handed over a worn book. Poirot flipped through it, noting unturned pages and no bookmarks. You read, yet the pages are pristine. Curious. Caldwell flushed. I skimmed it. Poirot moved to Lady Eleanor's room, finding no novel on her bedside table, only a letter half-written in her hand, its ink black, not blue. In Mrs. Langdon's room, he noticed a loose floorboard near her bed, hiding a small box with a lock but no key. She refused to open it, her eyes fearful. Back in the library, Poirot examined the Manor's map again, focusing on the secret passages, paths. He returned to the alcove with the mirror, noticing a faint scratch on the glass as if something sharp had grazed it. The blade shard from the passage fit the mark perfectly. The killer used this mirror, Poirot murmured. But for what? To see or to be seen? He gathered the guests again, holding up the latest note. The killer speaks of the past. Each of you has a history with Langdon or his family. Lady Eleanor, your husband's death, linked to Langdon's business? She gasped. No, it was an accident. Caldwell shifted. My debts are my own. Langdon's funding my work, nothing more. Vance smirked. I wrote about his father's shady deals. Maybe someone didn't like it, Holt growled. Langdon's father was a cheat. I left his service years ago, Mrs. Langdon's whispered. The past. It haunts us all. Before Poirot could press further, a loud creak came from the hall. He and Hastings rushed to find a painting fallen from the wall, its frame cracked. A faint trail of blue ink marked the floor, leading to a side door. The killer moves again, Poirot said, his voice low. They are restless. He followed. The trail outside, where the fog hid all but a faint rose scent. A single footprint fresh in the mud matched the ones from the shattered window. Poirot collected a sample of the ink trail, confirming it matched Caldwell's vial. Back inside, he confronted Caldwell. This ink, Doctor, is on your sleeve, your desk, and now the hall. Your alibi crumbles. Caldwell paled. I swear, I was in my room. Someone's framing me. Poirot dismissed the guests, his mind buzzing. The ink, the glove, the perfume, the blade. They pointed in circles, but the alibis were weak. He sat in his room, sketching the clues, when a new note slid under the door. You test, but do you see? The truth hides in plain sight. Poirot smiled. The killer is clever, but their game betrays them. Hercule Poirot will not be outwitted. Chapter 9. A game of wits begins. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor hung thick, muffling the world beyond the windows, as if the house were cut off from reality. Inside, the tension was sharper than ever, each guest eyeing the others like cornered animals. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small frame dwarfed by the towering bookshelves, his notebook open to pages filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, and the latest note. You're near, but not near. Enough, the game grows darker. The blue ink smudge, the rose perfume, the blade shard, and the torn glove swirled in his mind. Pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face drawn, his hands restless. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "This killer's playing a game, all right. Notes, clues, broken windows, they're leading us in circles. How do we catch someone this clever?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the lamplight, his mustache twitching. "By being cleverer, mon ami. The killer thinks they control the board, but Hercule Poirot plays to win. Their game is bold, but every move reveals a weakness. We must push them, to make a mistake." Hastings frowned. "Push them? How?" "They're one step ahead always." "Not always," Poirot said, tapping his notebook. "The ink, the perfume, the glove. These are not accidents. The killer taunts, but they also fear discovery. We will turn their game against them." The library was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of old books and wax. Poirot examined the manor's map again, tracing the secret passage's paths. The alcove with the cracked mirror nagged at him, its purpose unclear. Why place a mirror in a hidden nook? He decided to inspect it again, but first he wanted to test the guests' reactions further. He gathered them in the drawing room, where the fire cast flickering shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes sharp but wary. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell sat with his book, his glasses slipping, his fingers tapping nervously. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his soldier's stance unbroken, but his eyes restless. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling, her gaze distant. Poirot held up the latest note. The killer writes again. The game grows darker. They challenge us, but they also reveal themselves. Each of you has a past tied to Langdon or his family. Speak now. Why would someone seek revenge? Lady Eleanor's voice trembled. My husband's death was an accident. I've no enemies here. Caldwell adjusted his glasses. My debts are my own. Langdon's help doesn't make me a killer. Vance's eyes narrowed. I wrote about his father's dirty deals. Maybe someone didn't like the truth. Holt growled. Langdon's father cheated me out of my share, but I don't kill maids, Mrs. Langdon whispered. The past, it's heavy, but I've done nothing wrong. Poirot's gaze was steady. Yet, someone kills, and their clues point to you all. Perfume, ink, a glove, a blade. Who was in the hall last night when the painting fell? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Vance's fingertip, barely visible. Mademoiselle Vance, you write often. Do you use blue ink? She laughed sharp and quick. Sometimes. So what? Half the world does. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. He decided to set a small trap. Tonight, he said, I will leave my door unlocked. The killer is bold, perhaps they will visit. Hastings gasped. Poirot. That's dangerous. A game of wits requires risk, mon ami. Poirot said, We will watch and wait. He sent the guests to their rooms, then explored the alcove again. The passage was cold, its walls damp. The mirror reflected his candle's flame, and he noticed a faint mark on the frame, a scratch like the one on the blade shard. He examined the floor, finding a tiny speck of wax, scented like roses. The killer used this mirror, Poirot murmured. To signal? To spy? We shall see. Back in the library, he found a hidden drawer in the desk, containing a photograph. Langdon's father with a group of men, including a younger Holt, their faces grim. A note on the back read, Debts unpaid. The handwriting matched the killer's. Notes, but the ink was black, not blue. Curious, Poirot said. The past speaks, but the killer twists it. He returned to the drawing room where Hastings waited. Anything, Poirot? A photograph, Poirot said, showing it. Holt and Langdon's father tied to old grudges. The killer knows this history. Before they could discuss further, a sharp clatter echoed from the kitchen. They rushed to find a pot on the floor, its lid rolling. The cook, trembling, pointed to a back door ajar. Someone was here, she cried. I saw a shadow. Poirot examined the scene. A faint rose scent lingered, and a single thread, green like Lady Eleanor's dress, caught on the doorframe. He followed the trail outside where the fog swallowed. The footprints. A small key half buried in the mud glinted in his candlelight. A key, Poirot said, pocketing it. Perhaps to Mrs. Langdon's locked box. He confronted the guests, holding up the thread. This was found in the kitchen. Madam Gray, your dress matches. Explain. Eleanor paled. I wasn't there. Someone's using my things. Vance smirked. Another coincidence, Eleanor? Caldwell shifted. This is absurd. We're all being framed. Holt's voice was gruff. Check the servants, they're sneaking around. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langdon. Madame, a key was found. Does it fit your box? Her eyes widened, but she shook her head. I don't know. Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The key, the thread, the photograph, they were threads in the killer's web. He set his trap, leaving his door unlocked, and waited in his room, a candle burning low. Hastings stood guard in the hall, his nerves frayed. At midnight, a soft creak sounded. Poirot's eyes snapped open. A shadow moved outside his door, then vanished. He rose, finding a new note on the floor. You invite, but I choose the time. The game is mine. Poirot smiled. The killer takes the bait, but they slip. Hercule Poirot will outplay them. Chapter 10. The Hidden Cipher. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor clung to the windows like a shroud, muffling the world beyond and casting an eerie glow over the old house. Inside, the tension was a living thing, sharp and heavy, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, his small frame poised in a leather chair, his notebook open to pages filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, and the latest note. You play well, but the board is mine. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, and small key danced in his mind. Pieces of a puzzle that grew more complex with each hour. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face pale, his hands fidgeting. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. This killer's always one step ahead. Notes, keys, threads, they're leading us on a wild chase. What's next? Another murder? Poirot's eyes sparkled in the lamplight, his mustache twitching. Not if Hercule Poirot can help it, mon ami. The killer plays a clever game, but every game has rules. Their notes are not just taunts, they are a cipher hiding their purpose. We must crack it. Hastings frowned. A cipher? You mean a code? In the notes? Oui, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. The words, the symbols, the clues, they form a pattern. The killer wants to be seen but not caught. We will turn their game against them. The library was still, its shelves looming with dusty books, the air thick with the scent of leather and wax. Poirot examined the latest note again, noting the blue ink's faint sheen and the rose scent clinging to the paper. He turned to the photograph from the hidden drawer, Langdon's father with a group of men, including a younger Holt, and the note on the back, debts unpaid. The handwriting matched the killer's, but something new caught his eye. A faint pattern in the letter's margins, tiny dots and dashes almost invisible. A cipher, Poirot murmured, holding the paper to the light. Morse, perhaps, or something more clever. He copied the dots and dashes into his notebook, decoding them slowly. They formed a single word. Revenge. His heart quickened. The killer speaks of revenge, Hastings, but for what? And against whom? Hastings leaned over. Revenge? That fits with Langdon's father, Holt's grudge, Caldwell's debts, Vance's stories. But how does Lily fit? Poirot nodded. A question we must answer. The maid was no random victim. She knew. Something saw something. We must dig deeper. He decided to revisit the secret passage's alcove, where the cracked mirror and blade shard had been found. Lighting a candle, he slipped behind the bookcase, the passage's damp walls cold under his touch. In the alcove, he examined the mirror, again noticing a faint etching in the glass, a series of numbers, 379. He jotted them down, his mind racing. A code? A lock combination? Or something else? The killer leaves traces, Poirot said to himself. They are bold, but not flawless. Back in the library, he tested the numbers on the hidden drawer's lock, but they didn't fit. He turned to the Manor's map, tracing the passage's paths. The numbers didn't match any room or floor, but they nagged at him. He decided to search the guests' rooms again, focusing on their possessions. In Lady Eleanor's room, he found a locket with a photograph of her late husband, inscribed with 3 to 779. A date, perhaps their wedding. In Dr. Caldwell's room, a notebook had a page marked Test 379 with chemical formulas. Miss Vance's desk held a draft article, its page number 379 circled in blue ink. Holt's room had a military log, entry 379, noting a failed mission tied to Langdon's father. Mrs. Langdon's locked box, opened with the key from the garden, contained a letter dated March 7, 1979, hinting at a family betrayal. Too many coincidences, Poirot murmured. The numbers are a cipher, linking the past to the present. He gathered the guests in the drawing room where the fire cast uneasy shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. Dr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Vance leaned back, her red hair bright, her smirk sharp. Mr. Holt stood stiff, his eyes hard. Mrs. Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up his notebook. A cipher has been found. Dots and dashes spelling revenge, and numbers 379 appear in your possessions. Explain. Lady Eleanor gasped. My locket, it's personal. It has nothing to do with this. Caldwell frowned. My notes are scientific. Numbers are common in my work. Vance laughed. My article? Just a draft. You're reaching, Monsieur Poirot. Holt's voice was gruff. My log is old history. Langdon's father ruined me, but I didn't kill the maid. Mrs. Langdon whispered, my letter. It's private, please don't ask. Langdon stepped forward. This is absurd, Poirot. Numbers and dots, you're chasing ghosts. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Not ghosts, monsieur. Truth. The killer uses this cipher to point to the past. Who among you has a grudge deep enough to kill? The guests shifted, their denials sharp. Poirot noticed a faint tremor in Vance's hand, a bead of sweat on Caldwell's brow. He decided to push further. Tonight I will leave a clue in the library, a trap for the killer. Let us see who takes it. Hastings whispered. Another trap, Poirot. You're playing with fire. A game of wits requires boldness, mon ami, Poirot said. We will watch. He placed a fake note in the library's hidden drawer, marked with the snake and dagger symbol and the numbers 379. He and Hastings hid nearby, waiting. At midnight, a shadow moved, a figure in a dark coat, slipping behind the bookcase. Poirot followed silently, finding the figure in the alcove holding the note. The mirror reflected their face, but the fog outside blurred the image. Show yourself, Poirot called, his voice sharp. The figure fled, dropping the note. Poirot retrieved it, finding a new word scribbled in blue ink. Soon. The rose scent lingered. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. Someone was in the passage tonight. Who? They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot noticed a speck of dust on Holt's coat matching the passage's stone. Monsieur Holt, you were in the billiard room, you said. Yet dust betrays you. Holt's face reddened. I walked the halls. I didn't go near your trap. Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The cipher, the numbers, the shadow. They were pieces of the killer's game. He sat in his room sketching the clues when a new note slid under the door. You set traps, but I set the rules. The next move is mine. Poirot smiled. The killer is clever, but Hercule Poirot is cleverer. The game continues. Chapter 11. Secrets in the Library. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor pressed against the windows, thick as a curtain, hiding the world beyond. Inside, the air was heavy with suspicion, every creak of the old house making hearts race. Hercule Poirot, stood in the library, its towering shelves casting long shadows in the dim lamplight. His notebook lay open on the desk, filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 379, and the latest note. You see the past, but not the player. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, and small key swirled in his mind, each a thread in the killer's intricate web. Captain Hastings paced nearby, his face tight, his hands restless. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice hushed. This killer's playing us like pawns. Notes, ciphers, shadows in the passage, they're always ahead. How do we catch them? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. By finding their secrets, mon ami. The library holds more than books. It holds the past. The killer knows this, and so must we. Their game is clever, but Hercule Poirot will turn the tables. Hastings frowned. The library? You think the answer's here? In a book? Perhaps, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. Or in what the books hide. The cipher, the numbers 3 to 7 to 9, they point to 1979, a year of betrayal. The killer's motive lies there, and the library may hold the key. The library was silent, its air thick with the scent of old leather and dust. Poirot examined the desk again, where the photograph of Langdon's father with Holt and others had been found, its note reading, "Debts unpaid." He ran his fingers along the shelves, searching for anything out of place. Near the map of the manor, he noticed a book slightly askew, a thick volume titled History of Ravenwood. He pulled it down, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed, its cover stamped with the snake and dagger symbol. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, opening it. The journal belonged to Langdon's father, dated 1979. Its entries detailed a business deal gone wrong, a scheme that bankrupted families, ruined careers, and sparked bitter grudges. Names appeared: Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and a woman named Beatrice Harrow linked to Mrs. Langdon's family. Hastings leaned over. Beatrice Harrow? That's Mrs. Langdon's maiden name, isn't it? Oui, Poirot said. The past ties them all to this house. The killer seeks revenge for 1979, but why Lily? She was not part of that time. He flipped through the journal, finding a page with a cipher, dots and dashes like those on the killer's notes spelling justice. A loose sheet fell out, written in blue ink. The debt will be paid in blood. The handwriting matched the killer's, but the paper was newer, as if written recently. A clue, Poirot said, pocketing the sheet. The killer uses the past to fuel their game. He decided to confront the guests, but first he explored the secret passage again, focusing on the alcove with the cracked mirror. Lighting a candle, he slipped behind the bookcase, the passage's damp walls cold under his touch. In the alcove, he found a faint mark on the floor, a scuff as if something heavy had been dragged. He followed it to a hidden panel, opening to a small room with a locked chest. The key from the garden fit perfectly, revealing papers inside. Contracts from 1979, signed by Langdon's father and the guests' families, all marked with the snake and dagger symbol. The killer knows these secrets, Poirot murmured. They use them to taunt us. Back in the library, he gathered the guests, their faces tense in the firelight. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes sharp. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her cheeks pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk faint. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the journal. This was found in the library. Written by Langdon's father. It speaks of 1979, a deal that ruined lives. Each of you is connected. Who seeks revenge? Lady Eleanor gasped. My husband lost everything, but I didn't kill anyone. Caldwell's voice was tight. My mentor was destroyed by that deal. I've moved on. Vance laughed sharply. My father was slandered. I wrote the truth, but I'm no killer. Holt growled. Langdon's father betrayed me. I've no love for this family, but I didn't touch the maid, Mrs. Langdon whispered. My family. We suffered too, but I want peace. Langdon's jaw tightened. This is old history, Poirot. Why drag it up? Because, Poirot said, the killer uses it. This note, he held up the sheet from the journal, says the debt will be paid in blood. Who wrote it? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Mrs. Langdon's sleeve, barely visible. Madame, you use blue ink? She paled. No. I write letters sometimes. It's nothing. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. He decided to set another trap. Tonight I will leave the journal in the library, open to this page. Let us see who comes for it. Hastings whispered. Another trap, Poirot? You're poking a hornet's nest. A game of wits requires daring, mon ami, Poirot said. We will watch. He left the journal on the desk, its pages open to the 1979 entries, and hid with Hastings behind a curtain. At 1 a.m., a shadow moved, a figure in a dark cloak slipping into the library. They touched the journal, then froze, as if sensing eyes. Poirot stepped out, his voice sharp. Show yourself. The figure fled, dropping a pen, blue ink, its tip wet. The rose scent lingered. Poirot retrieved the pen, noting its fine make, unlike the Manor's supplies. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. Someone was in the library tonight, holding this pen. Who? They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot noticed a faint tremble in Vance's hand, a bead of sweat on Caldwell's brow. Mademoiselle Vance, you write with such pens? She smirked. I'm a writer. I use many pens. Prove it's mine. Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The journal, the chest, the pen, they were pieces of the killer's puzzle. He sat in his room sketching the clues when a new note slid under the door. You find secrets, but not the truth. The game tightens. Poirot smiled. The killer is bold, but Hercule Poirot is bolder. The net closes. Chapter 12. The Unexpected Witness. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor clung to the windows like a heavy blanket, making the old house feel like a ship lost at sea. Inside, suspicion hung in the air, sharp and bitter, as the guests eyed each other, with growing fear. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its shelves looming in the dim lamplight, his notebook open to pages filled with the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 379, and the latest note. You're close, but the shadows hide me. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, and blue ink pen swirled in his mind, each a piece of the killer's clever puzzle. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his face pale, his hands restless. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. This killer's always slipping away. That pen last night, the shadow in the library, they're mocking us. How do we pin them down? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. By finding what they cannot hide, mon ami. The killer plays a bold game, but even shadows leave traces. An unexpected witness may yet reveal them. Hastings frowned. A witness? Everyone's lying or hiding something. Who could it be? Poirot tapped his notebook. Someone who sees but is not seen. The servants, perhaps. They move through this house unnoticed, yet they hear and see much. We must listen to their whispers. The library was quiet, its air thick with the scent of old books and wax. Poirot examined the blue ink pen from the library trap, its fine make suggesting wealth or care. He turned to the journal of Langdon's father, its 1979 entries detailing a deal that ruined lives. Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's family. The cipher spelling justice and the note, the bourse, debt will be paid in blood, pointed to revenge. But the killer's identity remained elusive. Poirot decided to question the servants, starting with the cook, Mrs. Harrow. He found her in the kitchen, a stout woman with nervous hands, scrubbing pots with fierce energy. Mrs. Harrow, Poirot said, his voice gentle. You saw a shadow in the kitchen before the pot fell. Tell me more. She hesitated, her eyes darting. It was quick, sir. A dark shape, moving to the back door. I didn't see a face. Poirot leaned closer. But you heard something, oui? A sound, a word? She swallowed. A whisper, maybe. Like, soon. But I can't be sure. Poirot's heart quickened. The word soon matched the note dropped in the library. Merci, Mrs. Harrow. You are a witness, even if you doubt it. Next he sought the butler, Grayson, whose pale face and sharp eyes gave nothing away. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, you know this house's secrets, the passages, the journal. Did you see anyone near the library last night? Grayson's lips twitched. I was in my quarters, sir. I saw nothing. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Grayson's cuff. Your cuff, monsieur. Ink. You write with such a pen? Grayson stiffened. I handle the master's correspondence. It's common. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. He returned to the library, where he found a new clue. A torn piece of fabric, green like Lady Eleanor's dress, caught on a splintered shelf. He pocketed it, his mind racing. The servants saw more than they said, but the guests' secrets were deeper. He gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fire cast uneasy shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the fabric. This was found in the library. Near the passage, Madame Gray, it matches your dress, explain. Eleanor gasped. I wasn't there. Someone's using my things. Vance laughed. Again, Eleanor? Your dress, your perfume. How unlucky. Caldwell frowned. This is pointless. We're all being framed. Holt growled. Check the servants, Poirot. They're sneaking around. Mrs. Langdon whispered, I saw a light last night near the library, but I didn't go near. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A light, madame? Describe it. She hesitated. Faint, like a candle, moving in the hall. Poirot nodded. Merci. The killer moves, but they are seen. We have a witness. He decided to set another trap, this time using the servants. He asked Mrs. Harrow to spread a rumor among the staff that he'd found a crucial clue. A hidden letter in the library. He and Hastings hid near the kitchen, watching. At midnight, a figure slipped into the library. A servant, young and nervous, named Tom, the stable boy. He searched the desk, then fled when Poirot stepped out. Tom, Poirot called. What, do you seek? Tom froze, his eyes wide. I heard about a letter, sir. I thought it might be important. Poirot's voice was firm. Important to whom? The killer? Tom shook his head. No, sir, I heard things. About 1979. My pa worked here then. He said bad things happened. Poirot's heart quickened. Your father? Tell me. Tom swallowed. He said the old master, Langdon's father, ruined folks. Someone swore revenge. I thought the letter might say who. Poirot dismissed him, his mind buzzing. Tom was an unexpected witness, his father tied to 1979. He returned to the drawing room, confronting the guests. A servant saw a light last night near the library. Who carried a candle? They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot noticed a faint rose scent on Vance's scarf, a speck of dust on Holt's boots. Monsieur Holt, you were in the passage again? Holt's face reddened. I walked the halls. I didn't go sneaking. Poirot dismissed them, his mind racing. The servant's story, the fabric, the light, they were pieces of the killer's game. He sat in his room, sketching the clues, when a new note slid under the door. Witnesses, see shadows, not truth. The game is mine. Poirot smiled. The killer fears the light, but Hercule Poirot will shine it. Chapter 13. Poirot's first hypothesis. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor thickened, wrapping the old house in a ghostly embrace, as if shielding its secrets from the world. Inside, the air crackled with suspicion, every glance and whisper heavy with doubt. Hercule Poirot sat in the library, his small frame upright in a worn leather chair, his notebook open to pages crowded with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 3 to 79, and the latest note, "You seek witnesses, but I am the shadow." The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, blue ink pen, and green fabric danced in his mind, each a piece of the killer's intricate game. Captain Hastings stood by the window, peering into the fog, his face tense, his hands restless. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "this killer's like a ghost, slipping through passages, leaving notes, vanishing. That stable boy, Tom, saw something, but it's not enough. How do we catch them?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the lamplight, his mustache twitching. "By thinking like them, mon ami. The killer is clever, but their game has rules. They leave clues to taunt, but also to hide. I have a hypothesis, a first step to unmask them." Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. "A hypothesis? You know who it is?" "Not yet," Poirot said, tapping his notebook. "But the pieces form a picture. The killer seeks revenge for 1979, tied to Langdon's father. Lily's death was no accident. She saw or knew something. The clues point to someone close, someone who knows this house's secrets." The library was quiet, its shelves heavy with dusty books, the air thick with the scent of leather and wax. Poirot reviewed the journal of Langdon's father, its 1979 entries detailing a deal that ruined lives. Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's family. The cipher spelling justice and the note, "The debt will be paid in blood screamed revenge, but the killer's identity remained elusive." The numbers 379, linked to each guest's past, nagged at him, as did the blue ink and rose perfume. Poirot's hypothesis was forming. The killer was someone with intimate knowledge of the manor's passages, access to blue ink, and a personal grudge from 1979. The servants, like Tom and Grayson, knew the house, but the guests' motives were stronger. He needed more. He decided to re-examine the crime scene, the locked room where Lily died. Lighting a candle, he led Hastings to the small room, its air still heavy with the faint rose scent. The snake and dagger symbol, chalked on the floor, seemed to pulse in the candlelight. Poirot knelt, examining the spot where the bent hairpin was found. He noticed a faint scratch on the floorboard, as if something had been pried open. "Curious," Poirot murmured, pressing the board. It lifted, revealing a small hollow containing a folded note. He unfolded it, finding a single line in blue ink. She saw too much. The handwriting matched the killer's notes. Hastings gasped. "Poirot! That's about Lily! She knew something!" "Oui," Poirot said. "She was no random victim. This confirms my hypothesis. The killer is tied to the house, its secrets, and 1979. He pocketed the note and returned to the library, where he found a new clue, a book on ciphers, its page 379 marked with a blue ink dot. The numbers again. He flipped through it, finding a section on substitution ciphers, with a sample decoding to "Revenge is sweet." His heart quickened. The killer was weaving their motive into every clue. Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fire cast flickering shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes sharp but wary. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk faint. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the new note. This was found under a floorboard in Lily's room. She saw too much. The killer murdered her for what she knew. What did she see? Lady Eleanor gasped. She brought me tea that day. She seemed nervous but said nothing. Caldwell frowned. She cleaned my room. Quiet girl, no trouble. Vance's eyes narrowed. Maybe she overheard something. Writers notice details. She might have too. Holt growled. Servants snoop. She poked her nose where it didn't belong. Mrs. Langdon whispered. She asked me about my family once. I thought it odd. Langdon stepped forward. Enough, Poirot. You're stirring panic. What's your point? My point, Poirot said, is that Lily's death was personal. Someone here feared her knowledge. I have a hypothesis. The killer is among you, driven by a 1979 grudge using this house's secrets to hide. The guests erupted, their denials loud. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Holt's fingers, a speck of dust on Vance's sleeve. He decided to set a new trap. Tonight, I will leave a clue in the library, a map marked with the killer's path. Let us see who seeks it, Hastings whispered. Another trap, Poirot. You're playing a dangerous game. A game of wits demands risk, mon ami, Poirot said. We will watch. He placed a fake map in the library, marked with the passage's path and the numbers 3 to 7 and 9. He and Hastings hid nearby, waiting. At 1 a.m., a figure slipped in, a cloaked shadow moving to the desk. They grabbed the map, then froze as Poirot stepped out. Show yourself, he called. The figure fled, dropping a small vial, rose perfume, half empty. The scent filled the air. Poirot retrieved it, noting its fine glass, like the one in Eleanor's room. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. This vial was dropped in the library. Madame Gray, it matches yours. Eleanor paled. I told you I lost it. Someone's framing me. Vance laughed. How many things can you lose, Eleanor? Caldwell shifted. This is absurd. We're all targets, Holt growled. Check the butler, he's everywhere. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langdon. Madame, you spoke of Lily's question. What did she ask? She hesitated. She asked about my brother. He died in 1979. I didn't know why she cared. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Merci. The past speaks louder. As the guests dispersed, a loud crash echoed from the hall. Poirot and Hastings rushed to find a chandelier fallen, its crystals scattered. A faint trail of blue ink led to a side door vanishing in the fog. The killer moves again, Poirot said, his voice low. They fear my hypothesis. He sat in his room, sketching the clues, note, vial, cipher, numbers, in his notebook. A new note slid under the door. Your hypothesis is close, but I am closer. The shadows hide me. Poirot smiled. The killer feels the net tighten, but Hercule Poirot will catch them. Chapter 14. A Trail of Red Herrings. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor clung to the windows like a ghostly veil, muffling the world and casting eerie shadows across the old house. Inside, the air was thick with mistrust, every creak of the floorboards, making hearts race. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its towering shelves looming in the dim lamplight, his notebook open to pages filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 3 to 7 to 9, and the latest note. You guess, but I act, the game is mine. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, blue ink pen, green fabric, and vial of perfume swirled in his mind, each a piece of the killer's intricate puzzle. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face pale, his hands fidgeting. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. This killer's leading us on a wild chase. Notes, perfume, pens. They're planting clues to confuse us. Are we falling for it? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. A trail of red herrings, mon ami. The killer scatters false leads to cloud the truth, but Hercule Poirot sees through the fog. Their clues are too many, too perfect. We must sift the true from the false. Hastings frowned. Red herrings? You mean the perfume, the ink, all of it? Perhaps, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. The killer wants us to chase shadows. Eleanor's perfume, Caldwell's ink, Holt's glove. But the truth lies in what they cannot hide. Their motive, tied to 1979, the library, was silent, its air heavy with the scent of old books and wax. Poirot reviewed the journal of Langdon's father, its 1979 entries detailing a deal that ruined lives, Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's brother. The cipher spelling justice and the note. She saw too much about Lily pointed to revenge, but the killer's identity remained elusive. The numbers 3 to 79, linked to each guest's past, suggested a shared grudge, but the abundance of clues felt deliberate. Poirot's hypothesis evolved. The killer was someone with deep knowledge of the manor and its history, planting clues to mislead while protecting their true motive. He decided to focus on the red herrings, testing which clues held truth. He examined the vial of rose perfume from the library trap, noting its fine glass matched Eleanor's, but was also common among wealthy households. The blue ink pen, found in the library, bore no fingerprints, as if wiped clean, a deliberate act. He decided to revisit the secret passage's alcove, where the cracked mirror and blade shard were found. Lighting a candle, he slipped behind the bookcase, the passage's damp walls cold under his touch. In the alcove, he noticed a faint mark on the mirror's frame, a tiny symbol, not the snake and dagger, but a star, etched with a sharp tool. He sketched it, his mind racing. A new cipher? Or another distraction? The killer plays games, Poirot murmured, but even red herrings reveal intent. Back in the library, he found a new clue, a hidden panel behind a shelf, containing a small ledger. It listed payments from 1979, made by Langdon's father to an unknown party, marked with the star symbol. The amounts were large, suggesting blackmail or a cover-up. Poirot pocketed the ledger, its pages brittle but damning. He gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fire cast flickering shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the ledger. This was found in the library, detailing payments from 1979, marked with a star. It speaks of secrets. Blackmail, perhaps. Who knows of this? Langdon's jaw tightened. My father's affairs were complex. I know nothing of a star. Eleanor gasped. Blackmail? My husband never mentioned such things. Caldwell frowned. My mentor was ruined, not bribed. This is irrelevant. Vance's eyes narrowed. Sounds like a cover-up. My father was silenced, maybe this is why, Holt growled. Langdon's father paid to hide his crimes, I saw it myself. Mrs. Langdon whispered, my brother. He knew something. He died for it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Merci. The killer leaves clues, but some are false. The star. Does it mean anything to you? They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Vance's sleeve, a speck of dust on Mrs. Langdon's shawl. He decided to set a new trap. Tonight I will leave this ledger in the library open to the star-marked page. Let us see who seeks it. Hastings whispered. Another trap, Poirot. You're daring the killer to act. A game of wits requires boldness, mon ami, Poirot said. We will watch. He placed the ledger on the desk, open to the 1979 payments, and hid with Hastings behind a curtain. At 2 a.m., a figure slipped in, a cloaked shadow, moving to the desk. They touched the ledger, then froze as Poirot stepped out. Show yourself, he called. The figure fled, dropping a small paper with the star symbol and the word pay. The rose scent lingered. Poirot retrieved it, noting the blue ink matched the killer's notes. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. This was dropped in the library. The star, the word pay, who wrote it? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint tremor in Caldwell's hand, a bead of sweat on Holt's brow. Dr. Caldwell, your ink matches this note? Explain. Caldwell paled. I told you someone's framing me. Vance laughed. Or you're clumsy, Doctor. Eleanor whispered. This is too much. We're all suspects. Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The star, the ledger, the note. They were red herrings meant to distract. He questioned the servants again, focusing on Tom, the stable boy. Your father worked here in 1979, Poirot said. Did he speak of a star symbol? Tom hesitated. He mentioned a secret group. They used a star to mark payments. He wouldn't say more. Poirot's heart quickened. Merci, Tom. You are a witness. As he returned to the library, a loud crash echoed from the hall. He and Hastings rushed to find a mirror shattered, its frame marked with a star. A faint trail of blue ink led to the garden door, vanishing in the fog. The killer scatters more. Herrings, Poirot said, his voice low. But they reveal themselves. He sat in his room, sketching the clues, star, ledger, note, in his notebook. A new note slid under the door. You chase herrings, but I swim free. The game is mine. Chapter 15. The Killer's Taunting Letter. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor thickened, wrapping the old house in a ghostly haze that seemed to pulse with secrets. Inside, the tension was sharp as a blade, each guest and servant moving with wary eyes as if expecting the shadows to strike. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its shelves towering in the dim lamplight, his notebook open to pages crowded with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 379, the star symbol, and the latest note. You see the bait but not the hook. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, blue ink pen, green fabric, vial of perfume, and star-marked ledger swirled in his mind, each a piece of the killer's cunning puzzle. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face pale, his hands restless. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. This killer's toying with us. Notes, symbols, broken mirrors, they're laughing at us. That star symbol, the ledger, it's another trick, isn't it? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. A trick, yes, but also a clue, mon ami. The killer scatters red herrings to confuse, but their taunts betray them. A new letter has come, and it will reveal more of their mind. Hastings frowned. A letter? Another note under your door. Non, Poirot said, pulling a sealed envelope from his pocket. This was left on the library desk this morning, addressed to me. The killer grows bolder. He opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet in the killer's sharp handwriting, marked with the snake and dagger symbol. It read, Monsieur Poirot, you chase shadows, but I am the light. Your traps amuse me, but they will not catch me. The debt of 1979 will be paid in blood. Look to the stars, but beware the hook. The blue ink and faint rose scent matched the previous notes. Hastings gasped. They're challenging you directly, Poirot. And that star again, what does it mean? Poirot tapped the letter. The star is no accident. It ties to the ledger, the secret group, the 1979 betrayal. The killer knows I am close, so they taunt to distract, but Hercule Poirot will not be swayed. The library was silent, its air heavy with the scent of old leather and wax. Poirot reviewed the ledger from the hidden panel, its 1979 payments marked with the star symbol, suggesting blackmail or a cover-up. The journal of Langdon's father detailed the deal that ruined lives: Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's brother. The cipher spelling justice and the note she saw too much about Lily pointed to revenge, but the killer's identity remained elusive. Poirot's hypothesis sharpened. The killer was someone with deep ties to 1979, access to the manor's secrets, and a flair for misdirection. The star symbol, new to the clues, suggested a hidden player, a member of the secret group Langdon's father paid off. He decided to focus on the letter's mention of stars. He examined the library shelves again, searching for books on astronomy or symbols. A thin volume, Celestial Signs, caught his eye, its page 379 marked with a star drawn in blue ink. Inside, a passage described a secret society in the 19th century, using a star as their mark. A note in the margin, in the killer's handwriting, read, "The star shines on the guilty." "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "The killer points to this society. But is it truth or another herring?" He decided to revisit the secret passage's alcove, where the star was etched on the mirror's frame. Lighting a candle, he slipped behind the bookcase, the passage's damp walls cold under his touch. In the alcove, he found a new clue, a small brass star hidden in a crack, its edges sharp. He pocketed it, his mind racing. A token of the society, or another distraction? Back in the library, he gathered the guests, their faces tense in the firelight. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her cheeks pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the letter. "The killer has written to me. Look to the stars, but beware the hook. A brass star was found in the passage. Who knows of this symbol?" Langdon's jaw tightened. "My father's dealings were private. I know nothing of stars," Eleanor gasped. "A star? My husband had a ring with a star. He said it was a gift." Caldwell frowned. "My mentor mentioned a group, but I thought it a rumor." Vance's eyes narrowed. "My father wrote about a secret society." "I thought it was fiction," Holt growled. "Langdon's father had many secrets. I saw men with star pins, but I stayed clear." Mrs. Langdon whispered, "My brother, he wore a star pendant. He died in 1979. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Merci. The star links you all to 1979. The killer uses it to taunt." "Who wrote this letter?" They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Mrs. Langdon's hand, a speck of dust on Vance's sleeve. He decided to set a new trap. "Tonight, I will leave this letter in the library, marked with a star. Let us see who seeks it." Hastings whispered. "Another trap, Poirot? You're daring them to act." "A game of wits demands courage, mon ami," Poirot said. "We will watch." He placed the letter on the desk marked with a star and hid with Hastings behind a curtain. At 2 a.m., a figure slipped in, a cloaked shadow moving to the desk. They touched the letter, then froze as Poirot stepped out. "Show yourself," he called. The figure fled, dropping a small notebook. Poirot retrieved it, finding pages filled with star symbols and the word "revenge" in blue ink. The rose scent lingered. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. "This notebook was dropped in the library. It speaks of stars and revenge. Who owns it?" They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot noticed a faint tremor in Vance's hand, a bead of sweat on Caldwell's brow. "Mademoiselle Vance, your writing is sharp, like this notebook's." Vance laughed. "I'm a writer, Poirot. Doesn't mean it's mine." Eleanor whispered, "This is too much. We're all in danger." Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The star, the letter, the notebook, they were pieces of the killer's game, some true, some false. He questioned Tom, the stable boy, again. "Your father spoke of a star group. Did he name anyone?" Tom hesitated. He said the old master paid men to stay quiet. One was called Harrow, my kin." Poirot's heart quickened. "Harrow? Like Mrs. Langdon?" Tom nodded. "Her brother, I think." As Poirot returned to the library, a loud thud echoed from the hall. He and Hastings rushed to find a bookshelf toppled, books scattered. A faint trail of blue ink led to a side door vanishing in the fog. "The killer scatters more herrings," Poirot said, his voice low. "But they cannot hide forever." He sat in his room, sketching the clues, star-letter notebook in his notebook. A new note slid under the door. "You chase stars, but I am the night. The game is mine." Poirot smiled. The killer taunts, but Hercule Poirot sees the light. Chapter 16. The clock ticks. On the fog outside Ravenwood Manor hung heavy, cloaking the old house in a ghostly shroud that seemed to pulse with menace. Inside, the tension was sharper than ever, each guest and servant moving with cautious steps, their eyes darting to shadows. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its towering shelves casting long shadows in the flickering lamplight. His notebook opened to pages filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers, 7 to 9 the star symbol, and the latest note. You see the stars, but not the darkness. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, blue ink pen, green fabric, vial of perfume, star-marked ledger, and notebook with revenge swirled in his mind, each a piece of the killer's intricate game. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face pale, his hands restless. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low. "This killer's relentless. Notes, stars, smashed bookshelves, they're toying with us. That letter to you, it's personal. How much time do we have before they strike again?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. "The clock ticks, mon ami, but Hercule." Poirot keeps time. The killer's taunts grow desperate, they feel the net closing. Their clues, their notes, they point to 1979, but also to their fear. "We must act swiftly." Hastings frowned. "Act? You mean another trap? Or do you know who it is?" "Not yet," Poirot said, tapping his notebook. "But the pieces align. The killer is tied to the 1979 betrayal, knows the manor's secrets and fears discovery. The star symbol, a secret society, hides their motive. We must find the final clue." The library was silent, its air thick with the scent of old leather and dust. Poirot reviewed the killer's letter. "Look to the stars, but beware the hook. The star symbol, found in the ledger and etched on the alcove's mirror, linked to a secret group tied to Langdon's father's 1979 deal. The journal detailed the ruin of Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's brother. The cipher spelling justice and the note she saw too much about Lily confirmed revenge, but the killer's identity remained elusive." Poirot's hypothesis tightened. The killer was someone with intimate knowledge of the manor, access to blue, ink and rose perfume, and a personal loss from 1979, possibly a member of the Starmark Society. The abundance of clues, fabric, pen, vial, suggested deliberate misdirection, but the star was key. He decided to search the manor's attic, where old records might hide more about the 1979 society. Climbing the creaky stairs, he and Hastings entered a dusty space filled with trunks and cobwebs. Poirot opened a trunk marked with a star, finding a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon. They were from 1979, written by Langdon's father to a man named Harrow, Mrs. Langdon's brother, promising payment for silence. One letter mentioned a meeting at the manor, marked by a star pendant. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. Harrow was part of the society. His death, Mrs. Langdon's loss, fuels the killer's revenge. Hastings leaned over. "Mrs. Langdon? You think she's the killer?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, "or someone close to her. We must test this." Back in the library, Poirot found a new clue, a hidden drawer in a bookshelf, containing a star-shaped locket with a photograph of a young man, inscribed Harrow, 1979. The rose scent clung to it, and a faint blue ink smudge marked the clasp. "The killer leaves traces," Poirot said, pocketing the locket. "They are bold but careless." He gathered the guests in the drawing room where the fire cast uneasy shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her cheeks pale. Dr. Simon, Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the locket. This was found in the library, marked with a star and the name Harrow, Mrs. Langdon's brother. "It ties to 1979 and the secret society. Who knows of this?" Mrs. Langdon gasped, her eyes wide. "My brother's locket. I thought it was lost." Langdon's jaw tightened. My father's secrets are old news, Poirot. Why drag this up? Eleanor whispered. My husband had a star ring. I didn't know what it meant. Caldwell frowned. My mentor spoke of a group, but I thought it nonsense. Vance's eyes narrowed. My father wrote about a star society. I thought it was a story. Holt growled. I saw star pins, but I stayed out of it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The killer uses the star to point to 1979. Mrs. Langdon, your brother's death. Was it tied to this society? She hesitated, tears in her eyes. He worked for Victor's father. He died in an accident, but I never believed it. Poirot nodded. Merci. The killer seeks justice for him, perhaps. Who wrote the letter to me? They denied it, their voices tense. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Langdon's cuff, a speck of dust on Vance's sleeve. He decided to set a new trap. Tonight I will leave this locket in the library near the passage. Let us see who seeks it. Hastings whispered. Another trap, Poirot. You're pushing them hard. A game of wits requires pressure, mon ami, Poirot said. We will watch. He placed the locket on the desk near the passage's entrance and hid with Hastings behind a shelf. At 3 a.m., a figure slipped in, a cloaked shadow, moving to the desk. They touched the locket, then froze as Poirot stepped out. Show yourself, he called. The figure fled, dropping a small paper with the star symbol and the word now. The rose scent lingered. Poirot retrieved it, noting the blue ink matched the killer's notes. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. This paper was dropped in the library. The star, the word now. Who wrote it? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint tremor in Mrs. Langdon's hand, a bead of sweat on Langdon's brow. Monsieur Langdon, your cuff has ink. Explain. Langdon paled. I write letters. It's nothing. Vance laughed. Everyone's inky tonight, Poirot, Eleanor whispered. This is unbearable. We're all trapped. Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The locket, the paper, the star. They were pieces of the killer's game, some true, some false. He questioned Grayson, the butler, again. You knew Harrow. Did he wear a star locket? Grayson hesitated. He did, sir. He was loyal to the old master, but he died badly. Poirot's heart quickened. Merci. You see more than you say. As he returned to the library, a loud crash echoed from the hall. He and Hastings rushed to find a vase shattered, its fragments marked with a star. A faint trail of blue ink led to a side door, vanishing in the fog. The killer scatters more clues, Poirot said, his voice low. But the clock ticks for them. He sat in his room, sketching the clues, locket, paper, star, in his notebook. A new note slid under the door. You chase time, but I am timeless. The game is mine. Poirot smiled. The killer feels the pressure, but Hercule Poirot will outwit them. Chapter 17. The ticking clock tightens, the fog outside Ravenwood Manor thickened, shrouding the old house in a ghostly veil that seemed to whisper of secrets and danger. Inside, the tension was a coiled spring, ready to snap, as guests and servants moved with guarded glances, their nerves frayed. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its towering shelves casting jagged shadows in the flickering lamplight. His notebook opened to pages filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 379, the star symbol, and the latest note. The clock ticks, but I hold the hour. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, blue ink pen, green fabric, vial of perfume, star-marked ledger, notebook with revenge, star-shaped locket, and paper with now swirled in his mind, each a piece of the killer's intricate puzzle. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face pale, his hands fidgeting. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. This killer's relentless. Notes, stars, shattered vases. They're tightening the noose, but on us. That locket, the star. Society, how close are we? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. Very close, mon ami. The clock ticks for the killer, not us. Their taunts grow frantic. They know Hercule Poirot sees their game. The Star Society, the 1979 betrayal, the death of Harrow. These are the heart of their motive. We need one. Final clue. Hastings frowned. One clue? With all these notes and trinkets, you still need more? Oui, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. The killer scatters red herrings, perfume, ink, fabric to confuse, but the Star and 1979 are true. They killed Lily because she knew their secret. The final clue will unmask them. The library was silent, its air heavy with the scent of old leather and dust. Poirot reviewed the star-shaped locket, inscribed with Harrow 1979, and the letters from Langdon's father promising payment for silence. The ledger's star-marked payments and the journal's 1979 entries detailed a deal that ruined lives. Eleanor's, husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's brother, Harrow. The cipher spelling justice and the note she saw too much about Lily confirmed revenge, but the killer's identity remained elusive. Poirot's hypothesis solidified. The killer was someone deeply wronged in 1979, likely tied to the Star Society, with intimate knowledge of the Manor's passages and a flair for misdirection. Mrs. Langdon's brother Harrow was a key figure, and her grief made her a suspect, but the abundance of clues pointed to others too. He needed to trace the Star Society further. He decided to search the Manor's cellar where old records might hide more about the society. Descending the creaky stairs, he and Hastings entered a damp, shadowy space filled with crates and barrels. Poirot found a locked box marked with a star, its lock fitting the small key from the garden. Inside was a ledger older than the one in the library, listing members of the Star Society, names including Harrow, a man named Gray, Eleanor's husband, and a code name, Shadow. Payments to Shadow were large, dated 1979, and marked with the snake and dagger symbol. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. Shadow, the killer's alias perhaps. They were part of the society, betrayed like the others. Hastings leaned over. Shadow? That's what their last note called them. But who is it? Poirot nodded. We must find Shadow's true name. The killer hides behind this mask. Back in the library, Poirot found a new clue, a hidden compartment in a desk drawer, containing a star pendant with a tiny inscription. To Shadow for loyalty. The rose scent clung to it, and a faint blue ink smudge marked the chain. The killer leaves traces, Poirot said, pocketing the pendant. They are close, too close. He gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fire cast uneasy shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her cheeks pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the pendant. This was found in the library, inscribed to Shadow, a member of the 1979 Star Society. It ties to Harrow and the betrayal. Who is Shadow? Mrs. Langdon gasped, her eyes wide. My brother. He had a pendant like that, but he was no Shadow. Langdon's jaw tightened. This is nonsense, Poirot. My father's secrets died with him. Eleanor whispered. My husband had a star ring. Could he? Caldwell frowned. My mentor mentioned a Shadow, but I thought it a code for payments. Vance's eyes narrowed. My father wrote about a Shadow, a traitor in the society. Holt growled. I saw star pins, but no Shadow. This is a waste of time. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The killer calls themselves Shadow in their notes. They seek revenge for 1979. Mrs. Langdon, did your brother speak of a Shadow? She hesitated, tears in her eyes. He said someone betrayed the group. He never named them. Poirot nodded. Merci. The killer is Shadow, hiding among us. Who wrote the latest note? They denied it, their voices tense. Their voices. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Vance's fingers. a speck of dust on Langdon's cuff. He decided to set a new trap. Tonight, I will leave this pendant in the library near the passage. Let us see who seeks it. Hastings whispered. Another trap, Poirot? You're cornering them. A game of wits requires precision, mon ami, Poirot said. We will watch. He placed the pendant on the desk near the passage's entrance and hid with Hastings behind a shelf. At 3 a.m., a figure slipped in, a cloaked shadow moving to the desk. They touched the pendant, then froze as Poirot stepped out. Show yourself, he called. The figure fled, dropping a small paper with the star symbol and the word end. The rose scent lingered. Poirot retrieved it, noting the blue ink matched the killer's notes. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. This paper was dropped in the library. The star, the word end, who wrote it? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint tremor in Eleanor's hand, a bead of sweat on Caldwell's brow. Madame Gray, your perfume matches this scent. Explain. Eleanor paled. I told you I lost it. Someone's using it. Vance laughed. How many excuses, Eleanor? Caldwell snapped. We're all being framed. Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The pendant, the paper, the star, they were pieces of the killer's game, some true, some false. He questioned Tom, the stable boy, again. Your father knew Harrow. Did he mention a shadow? Tom hesitated. He said Shadow was someone close to the old master, trusted but dangerous. Poirot's heart quickened. Merci. You light the path. As he returned to the library, a loud crash echoed from the hall. He and Hastings rushed to find a clock smashed. Its hands stopped at 3:09. A faint trail of blue ink led to a side door, vanishing in the fog. The killer marks time, Poirot said, his voice low. But their hour is near. He sat in his room, sketching the clues, pendant, paper, star, clock, in his notebook. A new note slid under the door. You chase shadows, but I am the end. The game is mine. Poirot smiled. The killer feels the clock, but Hercule Poirot holds the key. Chapter 18. The Shadow's Last Move. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor clung to the windows like a ghostly shroud, wrapping the old house in an eerie silence that seemed to hold its breath. Inside, the tension was a living thing, sharp and electric. As guests and servants moved with wary eyes, their nerves stretched to breaking. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its towering shelves casting jagged shadows in the dim lamplight. His notebook opened to pages filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 379, the star symbol, and the latest note. Time runs out, but I am eternal. The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, blue ink pen, green fabric, vial of perfume, star-marked ledger, notebook with revenge, star-shaped locket, paper with now, star, pendant, and smashed clock swirled in his mind, each a piece of the killer's intricate puzzle. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face pale, his hands restless. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. This killer's cornered, but they're still striking. Notes, stars, smashed clocks. They're daring us to catch them. That shadow name, do you know who it is? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. The net tightens, mon ami. The killer, this shadow, feels the pressure. Their notes grow desperate, their clues frantic. They are close to their final move, but Hercule Poirot will make the checkmate. Hastings frowned. Final move? You think they'll kill again? Perhaps, Poirot said, tapping his notebook. But their game is unraveling. The Star Society, the 1979 betrayal, the death of Harrow. These are the heart of their motive. Shadow is someone wronged, hiding among us. We need one last clue to unmask them. The library was silent, its air heavy with the scent of old leather and dust. Poirot reviewed the star pendant, inscribed to Shadow, for loyalty, and the cellar, ledger listing Shadow among the 1979 Star Society members. The journal of Langdon's father detailed the ruin of Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's brother Harrow. The cipher spelling justice and the note she saw too much about Lily confirmed revenge, but the killer's identity remained elusive. Poirot's hypothesis was nearly complete. Shadow was a member of the Star Society, betrayed in 1979, with intimate knowledge of the Manor's passages and a personal vendetta. The abundance of clues, ink, perfume, fabric, were red herrings, but the star and Shadow were true. Mrs. Langdon's connection to Harrow made her a suspect, but Langdon, Vance, and even Grayson could not be ruled out. He decided to search the Manor's old chapel, a neglected wing where the Star Society might have met. Leading Hastings through dusty corridors, they entered a small room with stained glass windows, one depicting a star. Beneath it, Poirot found a hidden niche containing a sealed letter, marked with the snake and dagger symbol. It read, "Shadow, your loyalty is rewarded. The guilty will pay. L." The handwriting was Langdon's father's, dated 1979, and the idea rose scent clung to the paper. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. Shadow was promised justice but betrayed. This fuels their rage. Hastings leaned over. L. Langdon's father? So Shadow turned against him? "Oui," Poirot said. "The killer seeks revenge for that betrayal. We must find Shadow's true name." Back in the library, Poirot found a new clue. A hidden panel in the chapel's altar, revealed by pressing a star-shaped carving. Inside was a photograph. Langdon's father with Harrow, a younger Grayson, and a cloaked figure, their face obscured, holding a star pendant. A note on the back read, "Shadow's Oath, 1979. "The killer was there," Poirot said, pocketing the photograph. "They are no ghost." He gathered the guests in the drawing room, where the fire cast uneasy shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her cheeks pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the photograph. This was found in the chapel, showing the 1979 Star Society, Harrow, Grayson, and a cloaked figure called Shadow. "Who is Shadow?" Mrs. Langdon gasped, her eyes wide. "My brother. He was no traitor." Langdon's jaw tightened. "My father's secrets are buried, Poirot. This proves nothing." Eleanor whispered, "My husband knew that group. He feared them." Caldwell frowned. "My mentor was paid by them, but I don't know Shadow." Vance's eyes narrowed. "My father wrote about a cloaked figure. I thought it was a myth," Holt growled. "I saw them, but I stayed clear. Shadow was trouble." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The killer is Shadow, seeking revenge for 1979. Mrs. Langdon, did your brother name this cloaked figure?" She hesitated, tears in her eyes. He said Shadow was someone trusted, but he never said who." Poirot nodded. "Merci. The Aesop killer hides, but they will be found. Tonight I will leave this photograph in the library near the passage. Let us see who seeks it." Hastings whispered, "Another trap, Poirot? You're pushing them to the edge." "A game of wits requires daring, mon ami," Poirot said. "We will watch." He placed the photograph on the desk near the passage's entrance and hid with Hastings behind a shelf. At 4 a.m., a figure slipped in, a cloaked shadow, moving. To the desk, they touched the photograph, then froze as Poirot stepped out. "Show yourself," he called. The figure fled, dropping a small paper with the star symbol and the word "final." The rose scent lingered. Poirot retrieved it, noting the blue ink matched the killer's notes. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. This paper was dropped in the library. The star, the word "final." Who wrote it? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Grayson's cuff, a speck of dust on Vance's sleeve. "Monsieur Grayson, you were in the chapel in 1979. Did you know Shadow?" Grayson paled. I served the old master. I saw things, but I never knew names. Vance laughed. The butler's in deep, Poirot. Eleanor whispered, "This is too much. We're all doomed." Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The photograph, the paper, the star, they were pieces of the killer's endgame. He questioned Tom, the stable boy, again. "Your father knew Shadow. Did he describe them?" Tom hesitated. "He said Shadow was quiet, always watching. Someone in the house, not a guest." Poirot's heart quickened. "Merci." The shadow grows, clearer. As he returned to the library, a loud crash echoed from the hall. He and Hastings rushed to find a portrait of Langdon's father slashed, its frame marked with a star. A faint trail of blue ink led to a side door, vanishing in the fog. "The killer's last move approaches," Poirot said, his voice low. "But Hercule Poirot will be ready." He sat in his room, sketching the clues. Photograph, paper, star, portrait, in his notebook. A new note slid under the door. "You chase the end, but I am the beginning. The game is mine." Poirot smiled. The killer plays their final card, but Hercule Poirot holds the trump. Chapter 19. The Final Trap. The fog outside Ravenwood Manor pressed against the windows like a living thing, cloaking the old house in a ghostly veil that seemed to whisper of impending doom. Inside, the tension was a taut wire, ready to snap. As guests and servants moved with furtive glances, their hearts pounding with fear, Hercule Poirot stood in the library, its towering shelves casting jagged shadows in the flickering lamplight. His notebook opened to pages filled with sketches of the snake and dagger symbol, the word watch, the numbers 379, the star symbol, and the latest note. "The end is near, but I am forever." The blue ink smudge, rose perfume, blade shard, torn glove, small key, blue ink pen, green fabric, vial of perfume, star-marked ledger, notebook with revenge, star-shaped locket, paper with now, star pendant, smashed clock, slashed portrait, and photograph of the Star Society swirled in his mind, each a piece of the killer's intricate puzzle. Captain Hastings stood by the desk, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This killer's pushing us to the edge. Notes, stars, slashed paintings. They're ready to end this. Shadow, are we close to catching them?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mustache twitching. "Closer than ever, mon ami. The killer, this shadow, feels the walls closing in. Their notes are cries of defiance, but also fear. Hercule Poirot has set the final trap and they will not escape." Hastings frowned. "Final trap? You know who Shadow is?" "Not yet," Poirot said, tapping his notebook. "But the clues align. Shadow is a betrayed member of the 1979 Star Society, driven by revenge for Langdon's father's treachery. Lily died because she saw their secret. The final clue will unmask them." The library was silent, its air thick with the scent of old leather and dust. Poirot reviewed the photograph from the chapel, showing Langdon's father, Harrow, Grayson, and a cloaked Shadow. The star pendant, inscribed to Shadow, for loyalty, and the cellar ledger listing Shadow among the society members, pointed to a trusted insider. The journal detailed the 1979 deal that ruined Eleanor's husband, Caldwell's mentor, Vance's father, Holt, and Mrs. Langdon's brother, Harrow. The cipher spelling justice and the note she saw too much confirmed revenge, but Shadow's identity remained elusive. Poirot's hypothesis was nearly complete. Shadow was someone in the house, guest or servant, with deep ties to 1979, access to the manor's passages, and a personal vendetta. The Star Society's betrayal, centered on Harrow's death, was the motive, but the killer's red herrings, ink, perfume, fabric, clouded the truth. Mrs. Langdon, Grayson, and Vance were prime suspects, but Langdon's guarded demeanor and Caldwell's nerves could not be ignored. He decided to search the manor's old study, Langdon's father's private room, where the Star Society might have left records. Leading Hastings through shadowy corridors, they entered a dusty room with a heavy oak desk. Poirot found a hidden drawer, its lock marked with a star. The small key from the garden fit, revealing a sealed envelope, addressed to Shadow. Inside was a letter from Langdon's father dated 1979. Your loyalty is betrayed. The others will pay, but you are spared. Keep the star. The rose scent clung to the paper, and a faint blue ink smudge marked the seal. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. Shadow was promised salvation, but betrayed. This is their spark. Hastings leaned over. Betrayed? So Shadow turned on the society? Oui, Poirot said. The killer seeks justice for that betrayal. We must find Shadow's face. Back in the library, Poirot found a new clue, a hidden compartment in the study's bookshelf, containing a star-embossed diary. It belonged to Harrow, Mrs. Langdon's brother, with entries from 1979. The final page read, Shadow betrayed us. I trusted them, but they sold my secrets. I faced death. The handwriting was shaky, and a blue ink smudge marked the page. The killer is tied to Harrow's death, Poirot said, pocketing the diary. They are here watching. He gathered the guests in the drawing room where the fire cast uneasy shadows. Victor Langdon stood by the mantel, his blue eyes guarded. Lady Eleanor Gray clutched her handkerchief, her cheeks pale. Dr. Simon Caldwell adjusted his glasses, his fingers restless. Miss Clara Vance leaned against a chair, her red hair glowing, her smirk sharp. Mr. Reginald Holt stood rigid, his eyes hard. Mrs. Beatrice Langdon sat in a corner, her hands trembling. Poirot held up the diary. This belonged to Harrow, found in the old study. It names Shadow as a betrayer in 1979. The killer seeks revenge for his death. Who is Shadow? Mrs. Langdon gasped, tears in her eyes. My brother. He was no traitor. Who wrote this? Langdon's jaw tightened. My father's schemes are old, Poirot. This proves nothing. Eleanor whispered. My husband feared a betrayer. Could it be Shadow? Caldwell frowned. My mentor spoke of a traitor, but I never knew who. Vance's eyes narrowed. My father wrote about a betrayer in the society. Maybe Shadow, Holt growled. I stayed clear of their games. Shadow was their problem. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The killer is Shadow, hiding among us, avenging Harrow. Mrs. Langdon, did your brother name this betrayer? She hesitated, her voice breaking. He said it was someone close, someone he trusted. Poirot nodded. Merci. The killer is near. Tonight I will set the final trap. I will leave this diary in the library, open to Harrow's last entry. Let us see who comes. Hastings whispered. Final trap, Poirot. This is it, isn't it? A game of wits ends with truth. Mon ami, Poirot said, we will watch. He placed the diary on the desk, opened to the betrayal entry, and hid with Hastings behind a shelf. At 4 a.m., a figure slipped in, a cloaked shadow, moving to the desk. They touched the diary, then froze as Poirot stepped out. Show yourself, he called. The figure fled, dropping a small paper with the star symbol and the word, truth. The rose scent lingered. Poirot retrieved it, noting the blue ink matched the killer's notes. Back in the drawing room, he confronted the guests. This paper was dropped in the library. The star, the word truth. Who wrote it? They denied it, their voices overlapping. Poirot noticed a faint smudge of blue ink on Mrs. Langdon's sleeve, a speck of dust on Langdon's cuff. Mrs. Langdon, your sleeve has ink, explain. She paled. I write letters, it's nothing. Vance laughed. Everyone's inky, Poirot, Eleanor whispered. We're all trapped in this nightmare. Poirot dismissed them, his mind buzzing. The diary, the paper, the star, they were the killer's final taunts. He questioned Grayson again. You knew Harrow. Did he name Shadow? Grayson hesitated. He hinted at a trusted friend, but never said who. Poirot's heart quickened. Merci, the truth nears. As he returned to the library, a loud crash echoed from the hall. He and Hastings rushed to find a candelabra toppled, its candles marked with stars. A faint trail of blue ink led to a side door vanishing in the fog. The killer's last move is near. Poirot said, his voice low. But Hercule Poirot sets the stage. He sat in his room sketching the clues, diary, paper, star, candelabra, in his notebook. A new note slid under the door. You set traps, but I am the trapper. The game is mine. Poirot smiled. The killer plays their last card, but Hercule Poirot holds the ace.